All right, looks like we're all set up. Nice. Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and today we're going to be doing a live reaction to Star Wars for Warhammer 40K Episode 26, Renegade Destinies. Now, for some reason I should probably explain to this. I have a thumbnail for this prior to doing it because I took my headphones off, I have no idea what was being said, I took random screenshots and put them together. And thankfully, because Fan doesn't always put up images that directly correlate, sometimes, to what's going on, I could do that without too many spoilers. Also, hey, Xenodragon, just up for 12 months for a membership? Thank you very much, man. Thanks. I forgot I had memberships. Minus the fact that I actually get notifications of them now, which is really helpful. Yeah. It makes it easier to actually see the markers on the app so I can actually respond to people. It's nice. I like that. More importantly, we're going to jump right in and wonder if my title that everyone voted for, Anakin Goes to a Daycare, is going to be accurate or not. I don't know. But I also can't say it's wrong. And people then said they don't want to tell me if it's right or not because it would be a spoiler. Yeah. More importantly, let's just jump right into it. Now, where's that button? There's the button. Ignore all the tags up here. I react to a lot of stuff, and I want to get to even more that I just don't have time for. Time. What is it? Also, because I'll be doing this live, I might stop every now and again to do a commentary to anyone talking in the chat. If I do, I'll pause. That said, I'll try not to do so much because I really want to focus on this. So if I don't respond, sorry about that. More importantly, though, I'm really looking forward to this. Let's just do it, man. In collaboration with... Ooh, I like the music. Star Wars for Warhammer 40K, of course. Why are people saying war crimes in the chat? What is this episode getting up to? Episode 26. You know, this is going to sound weird, but I feel I should know this song for some reason. And Xenodragon just wrote, "Welcome to the evil time." Was my title accurate? Oh, no. Well, that's going to be a thing. Renegade. Destinies. I do like the music, though. Reminds me of Karina Baranza. Unless I'm missaying that name. That's probably accurate because it's me. Slow fade out until just this sticks in there. Nice. What the hell?
Inquisitor Tariler stepped out from the shadows of the now vacant outpost and into the steel shimmer of the Axumite street. He took a moment to pause and breathe in
Teeth?
long and deep. The rain thick and chilling the air about him to almost freezing. It fell over his pale skin and black eyes in soaking sheets, so clean, so cold. The dead weeping of an entire world.
Odd choice.
Now, all Wyler needed to do was sabotage the central spaceport, and his box would be closed and ready to be lit aflame, with all the sacrificial fools still locked inside.
What? See, that... He sounds like he's on the Axumite side, but I could be mistaken because he's talking about the dead and the dying, and usually anyone on the Imperial side right now don't usually stop to weep for the dead because they're still fighting. So he's on the Axumite side. He's talking about sabotaging the spaceport for the fools. And I'm thinking, okay, he's a, I guess, renegade because it's in my head from the title. But the use of the word sacrificial, that is a very, very notable word in 40K because sacrifices have direct power. Did I just get the name wrong or something? Oh, this is the Inquisitor? I legitimately forgot his entire name. Wow. I just saw teeth because he had the sharpened teeth.
His man,
How is he
Major
hiding an
Flecken,
Axumite,
was
though?
yet waiting at the Basilica of Salvation, ready to do his duty at a moment's notice, awaiting only Tar's command to act.
I completely
Tar
forgot his
had
name.
done everything to ensure the man's success, and the man in question...
Wait, he did everything... So is this the same Inquisitor that we saw fighting with the Axumites earlier? Because he came off completely differently, and I thought he was hiding or fighting someone. I thought that was a different Inquisitor, and I was assuming he was hunting the shark face, but is it a different Inquisitor or the same one, and this is the prey? I don't know.
Was a capable and loyal agent. He would
Or
have
was it an
no
agent we saw
trouble
before?
reaching the inner sanctum of even the most guarded place. The Inquisitor having disabled the vast majority of the security and detection systems between the Major and his goal ahead of time.
Already?
And even were he to be confronted,
The Major.
the prized equipment he had been given before the battle would suffice to defeat any sister and cause enough chaos in the process for his duty to be done.
Oh.
And, as a bonus, the Major would assume that taking possession of something like a void grenade would double as an assurance of his own ultimate survival. The poor fool.
I'm sorry, someone thought a void grenade was survival? Oh. Well. That's definitely on the Star Wars side, because nobody on the 40K side would ever be stupid enough to believe holding a vortex grenade is safe. That is a fuck everyone else moment. Oh, so wait. Xenodragon, you just gifted 5 memberships? One, I didn't know you could do that. 2, dude, thank you. That's actually so cool. Seriously, thank you for doing that, Xeno, but truly, don't push yourself on that. If it's too expensive, don't worry about it. I don't mind. I like when people join, but I don't want anyone to be in a bad financial situation. And people in the chat are saying that Samael is different from Tar. And that's good, because, frankly, if Samael and Tar were the same person, that is one hell of an acting trip that I would not be expecting. And very needlessly complicated.
The Inquisitor grinned his shark's grin, rain clattering on the white teeth. The Major was no doubt considering how best to preserve the use of the valuable weapon, either to keep for the future or to return back for the Inquisitor's favor.
Oh, so that was a Major on the 40K side who's dumb enough to believe having a vortex grenade is safety. Oh, yeah, that man is too stupid. He's going to do something horrible with it, isn't he?
What the man could not know was that, as far as Tar was concerned, that grenade had already been thrown. It was a shame to lose such a man as Major Flecken, but ultimately, pieces were meant to be exchanged, not hoarded.
Wait, it was already thrown?
But ultimately, pieces were meant to be exchanged, not hoarded. And the exchange was worth many times the value of the piece.
Is it the one we already saw?
This one world would set the stage for the entirety of the war to come. For here, all the most troublesome forces within his own command would die.
Oh! I wish I was better at remembering names. He's talking about the Major, but I don't... Ripoff Productions in the chat said Major Flecken was one of the guys Shock T killed. Okay. And then that's where the vortex grenade came in that was then used against the clones. So it was already thrown, and that was the setup. Okay. Interesting. And the vortex grenade was given to Lazarus, so Sharkface would have already realized it had been thrown because he's, I guess, aware of the situation at the whole. The timeline here is a little weird because it seems like he's talking about things that have happened already, but that, from his perspective, don't seem to have happened already. If anything, it almost sounds like this is happening before the bridge battle with Major Lazarus. Huh. That's an odd bit of temporal shenanigans there. Because he's talking about it as if it has already happened to him, but not to the people he's talking about.
Here, too, would he plant the seed that he would soon water and grow into the weed, which would finally strangle the Skywatch and remove their troublesome interventionism from the board once and for all.
Wait, that was his goal? Interventionism by the Skywatch? What? I mean, there's a lot of reasons I think that you might want to go after them. The interventionism, I could see that, but I would expect that would be more of a conservative, orthodox, rather than a radical Inquisitor doing that, because it's not normal. It's not what they should be doing. I could see that, but a radical Inquisitor, I mean, I guess they must have got in his way of his plans before, because I thought being all gung-ho of fuck this shit, we're fixing it now, would be more in their line of, well, we could break a few rules doing this, but it gets our job done. That actually surprises me. I nearly knocked my coffee onto my keyboard. That would have been bad. Also, Josh Tompkins. Metaphor. As far as he is concerned, it has been thrown. Okay, so as far as he's concerned, that does imply then that I was right about the timeline, so he doesn't know if it's thrown or not. Or it could also be happening prior to it being thrown. He just knows it will go that way. Huh.
Feeling a triumphant eagerness surging within him, it was all the tall Inquisitor could do to stifle the burning urge to hurry his two companions along as he turned back.
Who is he with?
The technically excommunicated Magos and Tar's own pet Daemon
okay,
host
same
made
people as
their way
before.
out the door he had just exited through and into the downpour.
And Zeno, you're okay?
The
Magos
was a
dolphin
tall,
whale.
thick, writhing mass of arms and mechadendrites.
Wait.
Though he hit it well with the fashion of his deep red robes, he had a centaur-like lower body, though he rarely deployed his back legs when it was not required of him.
That's oddly biological way to describe a Magos. I mean, usually at some point I thought they were all kind of just biological bags of sluggery. Tell me I'm wrong. No, please tell me I'm wrong. I don't want to believe that's actually accurate, but I'm looking at the call model and I'm thinking, yeah, skull, centipede, millipede, it kind of all looks the same.
When deployed, the metal-faced, single-eyed priest of the machine god could achieve terrifying speed. Right now, however, the ancient and mostly concealed heretic Magos was taking his time, as was the monster who followed after him.
We are nearly done.
Oh, I forgot how his voice
Tarweiler
sounded.
yelled through the rain.
Magos, summon the gun cutter.
The what?
Our next destination is the central spaceport.
He said. Omni Kraden Gamma nodded stiffly in response, the hem of his red, emerald-lined robe wagging in the downpour, mechanical eye flashing as he did as he was bid to. The Daemon host, a foul and enslaved being known as Jackalanica Centhurak Tres Vaniac, was still contenting his attention by licking his bloody lips and fingers.
Oh, that's why fans chose this image of the probably cannibal pretty boy. You know the style if you know anything about it. It's because he's talking about the demon host. This is the representation of the pretty boy demon host. Licking fingers, and they're just looking at this. Ugh. Sorry, that's just creepy. The models themselves are normally absolutely terrifying and just disturbing, and this doesn't make it better.
Making the Inquisitor wrinkle his nose at the beast. This, in turn, prompted the once man, now monster, to look up and sneer, licking the gore more slowly from its talons, and...
Because in the last time we saw him 2 episodes ago, he fed someone to the Daemon host. I don't know which is more shocking. The Daemon host obviously getting the better end of this deal, or the Inquisitor having the gall to sneer and look down on the monster who he's fully enabling. It's a radical Inquisitor who's working with demons. Of course he doesn't realize his own hypocrisy here. Or if he does, he just rationalizes it away. I'm pretty sure it's actually somewhere in 40K that it was either theorized or canonized. I can't tell which one, because it's 40K. It could be both at the same time. That radical Inquisitors who fight against chaos by embracing chaos are literally just full-on Tzeentch worshippers without realizing it. Because they fall into every damn plan and make things worse while trying to make it better. It's like literally the road to hell is paved with good intentions, followed by, and then they stop having good intentions.
And slicing its own tongue in the process. Though the sight nearly drew a cringe from Tar, he affected nothing but disgust, and the host
The fact that he
revealed nothing
actually
but
would
sadistic
cringe.
pleasure in the casual attempt to disturb him.
Is it casual,
Your
though?
every defiance is just another turn of my blade, Jackal. Do not forget, you have already earned one penance for yourself,
Does
which
he
will
care,
be
though?
enacted when we return to the prison.
The Inquisitor warned his demonic slave.
And this was his prison on the ship that Anakin was in, and that they had the Space Marine in. Oh. So that was his. I wasn't sure if there was more than one Inquisitor or not, but no, it is very much his. So he's a radical Inquisitor, and he's very much... Xenodragon, why are you saying evil equals fun? You know what? I'm not going to ask. That's probably going to be better if I don't find out.
It began to growl in response, the sound like distant animal screams. But the black eyes of the Inquisitor did not so much as flinch, promising ever-mounting punishment before the vile unthing collapsed to its knees and cowered in open submission. Tar flashed a shark-toothed smirk and...
Am I the only one hearing this entire segment right now?
open submission.
And thinking, oh, it's Count who needs an open submission. And the first thing that comes to their mind is, and it was all an act. Because that sounds like utter and absolute bullshit to me. I can't be the only one thinking that.
Tar flashed a shark-toothed smirk and turned away from it, his mind consumed with thoughts of the future and all its treasures. The gun cutter arrived soon after, slicing through the falling rain and smothered light with the loud roaring of burning
tech priest he's with.
thrusters. The jagged craft screeched overhead and began to circle, looking for a clear place to set down. The Inquisitor found a deep frown setting onto his maligned features, regarding the meandering form of his ship with a growing suspicion.
Wait, he has it with suspicion?
Features regarding the meandering form of his ship with a growing suspicion.
Of what?
He and his entourage were standing beside a clear stretch of road, easily large enough to accommodate the gun cutter's length and width. So why not hurry up and land here?
They're setting up for a shooting range?
Magos, connect my Vox to the captain. The longer he spins in the air, the more chance there is that he, and thus we, will be noticed.
It almost sounds like this is enemy action against him, and that would imply someone knows what's going on. It probably wouldn't be the Space Marine, who's for some reason, the name is escaping me right now. I don't know why, because I remember looking it up again to refresh myself right before the stream. It's just, that's a weird choice.
Tar
I want to say
said,
Samael, but I don't think he's in a
turning once
position
more
to do that.
regard the tech priest. There was a pause then, and after a time, Omni Creighton answered in a way which chilled the blood of even Inquisitor Tariler.
What?
Response:
Negative.
Communications
Fell.
18.7 seconds ago. Captain Sol Van Rierenlo is currently
Unreachable.
droned the
Who
Forbidden
took over?
Magos.
So we have no access to our own Voxnet at this range?
Asked the Inquisitor. Response:
Affirmative.
We do not.
The Inquisitor paused briefly then, breathing in once more, but this time sniffing the moist
Who would
air like
be
a
able to
weary
do this
hound.
right now?
His mind put together the clues he had access to, even as his nose began to pick up the faint whiffs of ozone, burning, and blood. A spike of adrenaline heated him, and he snapped back around to fully face Omni Creighton.
Get back inside the outpost, both of you!
He ordered, black eyes darting.
He's put together what's happening, and we get the image of a Mago, so I'm assuming that's Omni Creighton's stand-in image right now. Not them, but just the image to represent them talking. It's still not mentioning the ship falling, so that hasn't happened yet in this order. But who could possibly do this? And again, I want to say Samael, but I don't believe he's in a position yet to take over a gunship, considering where he was embedded in. He wouldn't be aware of the prisoner getting out yet. Honestly, I'm just wondering now who could possibly be acting against him unless this is a reveal of another player.
Make haste! We are about to be...
He began to say, suddenly silenced by the searing howls of blaster fire.
That was going to happen.
The Inquisitor whipped around at the sound, drawing his thin-bladed sword from its sheath in one fluid motion as he invested it with the power of his mind,
Ooh.
making the blade a focus point for his tremendous psychic might. He slashed the air, the wave of power which followed the wake of his sword emanating out and colliding with a sudden torrent of blue and green bolts.
That's one way to deflect.
Scattering the blaster fire in a spray of energy and smoking rain. Following the unexpected hail of near death and audible even through the consistent drone of the rain and distant thrum of thunder, was the blood-curdling roar of thousands of enraged clone troopers.
Oh! So I knew the clone troopers were coming in because of the image that fan shows. But does that mean the person on the Imperial gunship is taking it over by the clone troopers and they're actually just doing something you don't usually see in 40K and co-opting other people's tech? Or is this someone in the 40K side who's just ignoring an Inquisitor? That'd actually be way more damning. I initially thought it would be an enemy action against him, but not with the clone troopers. But now I'm not so sure.
Tarweiler craned his head and watched as a white and yellow horde of false men came pouring over the lip of a nearby suspended avenue, which hung above and slightly to the north of their current location. The clones were coming down almost right on top of them, and the mad replicate had not stopped blasting. The Inquisitor became a blur of motion, sword and power whipping out and driving away the deadly lines of plasmic weapons fire. Go! He ordered,
Gow?
voice frantic as he did his work. In response, the Daemon host wrapped its arms around Omnicraten Gamma's midsection, pulling itself and the Magos into the dark confines of the outpost, the door slamming shut after them. Relieved of his burdensome charges, the Inquisitor leapt to the right and began to dodge and duck the shots that came for him. The replicate forces were descending rapidly, desperately even. And already those carried aloft by jetpacks were directly contending with him, swooping low and close as they...
Wait. Is the battle on the bridge falling on him? But I know they had the ship, but that was... Are the plot lines actually converging right now? Oh. That would be interesting. So that wasn't his ship that he wasn't able to hail. It was just one that happened to be like that. So that would be the troopers who caught Lazarus when he fell then, if this is what I think it is.
They discharged their weapons.
I didn't think they'd actually fall into each other so
reached out
fast.
with one hand, a gesture he used to channel his psychic powers, snatching one of the flying clones out of the air with invisible fingers. The false man hung, jets burning as he flailed and kicked in the air, though he could struggle only briefly.
These would be the Chaos clones then.
Weiler waved his hand, swinging the replicate warrior across the air, catching 4 other flying troopers in a veering line, as he used the initial warrior as a lethal projectile. But the clone's brothers gave answer right away, homing in on the man and beginning to swarm. Tarweiler bounced torrents of blaster bolts back all the while, aiming to strike the Republic army which was ambushing him. But
Oh my god, they're reenacting Order 66, essentially. One Force user versus all the clones firing. So this does actually imply that it happened at the same time. So when he was talking about the grenade already being thrown, he knew what was going to happen. And I thought that implied that this was further back in time before that happened. But no, it was actually happening at the same time. And he just wasn't aware that his prediction had already come to pass. And now we're seeing that they were coming down the entire time from the retreat and all of those forces coming down. So this would be the tank or the flying, I guess, cutter that has Major Lazarus in it. And now they're meeting up with the Radical Inquisitor who's being flanked unaware of the clone chaos-infected forces. Probably Korn. Oh.
But finding himself becoming outpaced and
I wasn't expecting to see the
overwhelmed by
timelines
the sheer
converge here.
sudden numbers which came for him. Additionally, The replicate seemed possessed by
Accurate.
a fervor and frenzy that the Inquisitor
Possessed
had
is the right
not
word.
expected to find amongst the limp wills born from pale, cloned flesh. Furthermore, he had planned everything about
underestimates
this
them
plan,
naturally.
and had replanned each time he had received the opportunity to view the current situation in any broad sense.
He's a schemer
And
who got
from
surprised.
that planning, Tariler knew that these clones in particular should not be here. They should have been stationed at the park to protect the Republic's artillery support.
They got
That
crazy.
army somehow arriving here made absolutely no sense whatsoever. They would not abandon their positions, and the Imperial forces sent to stop them would not be enough. He knew this. And yet, here they were, fouling his designs. He ripped a dozen clones from their lines, tossing.
I think I'm actually in love with this entire scene right now, because it's like the schemer who's the evil mastermind who's pulling everyone's strings, being surprised by the other schemers of the 40K chaos, infecting, or I guess maybe the equivalent of the daemons in the Force hyperspace? I'm not really sure what the equivalent will be here, but in Force space, infecting the troopers and driving them to act in ways he wasn't expecting. Frankly, he's probably too used to chaos acting to his whims without him realizing it, considering he's basically their puppet. So now that they're not exactly doing what he expects because, they're listening to him because, he's doing what we want, let's take it on a bit more, isn't happening. So it's surprising him. So he's not actually good at planning. He's good at taking advantage of situations where he's not actually helping and doesn't realize it.
Them into the
Personal
yawning
opinion,
void
bud.
between the elevated platforms and streets, before cooking 3 more jet troopers mid-flight with a redirected scattering of blue plasma. Weiler activated another one of his precious digital weapons, issuing forth a lance of strafing black light from a bejeweled ring he wore on his free hand.
Really? Light ring?
But as he watched the energy rip mercilessly into the charging clones, he
And?
realized that he could not hope to kill them all.
Oh.
And his attempts at forcing them to rout,
I just
or
love
at
seeing this
least
guy get fucked
cease
over.
their advance, had been revealed to be blatantly fruitless endeavors. These replicae had been driven raving mad, a point emphasized a moment later when 4 of the jetpack-mounted troopers drove straight down into the Inquisitor, each carrying a stolen Imperial weapon in their hands. They flew in for him like competing
Melee
buzzards,
or shooting?
their knives, swords, and axes falling
Melee
upon
it is.
Tarweiler from all directions. The hubris of it scalded Tarweiler nearly as much as its effectiveness,
It was effective?
as he found his sweat mingling in thick rivulets with the rain, before he scattered it, driving up his own abilities as he accessed more and more of his hidden warp strength.
Oh?
He bent his body, as well as the fabric of reality, as he slipped and slid around the 4 strikes.
Okay, that actually sounds really cool. Bending reality in his own body. So he's not just doing the Matrix, he's actually doing the exaggerated version of that, where you're literally bending in ways your body shouldn't normally happen to be able to move to do it. Or he's bending space around so it does actually move in the right way.
His black blade licking out across arms and shoulders like a serpent's flickering tongue. Their weapon-bearing limbs came away in arcs of red and white. And as the replicae reeled back,
Like when I say
Tarweiler
anything about
pursued,
blood?
taking the heads off 3 shoulders, shocked to find his 4th strike evaded.
Oh.
The clone there ducked his sword and, with his remaining left arm, caught the falling axe he had been holding with his now severed right arm and slashed. The following
Whoa! Okay, that is very metal. He literally just had his arm cut off, ignored it, grabbed the weapon he was holding with one arm with the other, and then blocked a blow. That is... Frankly, I'm actually kind of impressed Fan would think to write such an action, so that is really impressive. A lot of what limits writing is people's ability to think of a situation that's so far out of their experience. So the idea of losing an arm, catching it with the other arm, and then continuing to act is such a cool little example of pushing yourself to think in a way that you're not going to normally experience. Because people think in ways of a gunfight in the same way they would play a game involving a first-person shooter perspective. Moving in, looking around, having the sights down. So you can kind of envision that. Even better if you've actually been in a firefight and you have some experience. In terms of realism, not in terms of that would still suck. But here, having that kind of perspective on how to write that is actually really good on Fan being able to come up with a scenario that he, I hope, hasn't been in it before to write that. I realize that's weird talking about all of this as fantasy, but a lot of fantasy in the more extreme aspects are things that you just naturally not rock away on, but walk away with, because it takes verisimilitude. You have to suspend disbelief to make it seem real. But when it comes to the more mundane actions of movement and locomotion, that's something that you have a much harder time with because it's natural to you. How you move is how you are expecting it to work. So having all those crazy motions and being able to describe them and think about them in the first place isn't the most normal thing. And people won't accept it if you just go, well, so they punched someone and then they grabbed a sword and then they punched them again with a sword. It works, but it seems stiff. What he's describing sounds much more fluid, so it's actually much better that he could think to do it in the first place. I actually really like that.
And holding with his now severed right arm and slashed. The following parry sent the Inquisitor stumbling, his sudden lack of balance haunting him instantly as he felt pain and heat blossom across his back, shoulder, and left knee. He was sent to the ground, barely maintaining his grip on his weapon, whipping the blade about wildly as he fended off the continuing raining assault. He tried to rise, but was too busy preserving himself from death by blaster to stop the...
And once again, the efficacy of Order 66 comes into play. It's not a matter of being better, it's all the DACA is a very good way to get rid of problems.
One armed clone from running him down, kicking him hard in the chest with an amount of strength he simply could not have had.
Is he the biggest
slid back, his
champion
transit
of
across
Khorne
the
right
wet
now?
steel street fueled by the force of the replicate's blow, coming to rest only once his back collided with the wall of the outpost.
Oh no. The Daemon host is servient right now because Tarweiler has the power to make it servient. And yes, the air quotes are implied. By this point, I think it's just kind of obvious. What would the Daemon host do when he sees all of the weakness of the injured Inquisitor? Does he keep the sham going because it suits its purposes? Or does he take advantage of Inquisitor is injured, I could have a snack? I don't know, and I'm kind of terrified. I want to find out.
He felt heat spill over his lips as he coughed blood onto his pearly white shark's teeth, and squinted through the rain and the sudden pain of several broken ribs to look up at the clone who was menacing him. The Inquisitor found a brief reprieve from the blaster fire of the others, and the one-armed clone stood over him, shielding him in his shadow. Tarweiler growled through stained fangs and made to lift his sword, but the clone stomped on his hand, pinning it down and breaking some of his fingers, kneeing the Inquisitor in the face. The Imperial gasped under the force of the blow, feeling a tooth chip before he was backhanded, hard with the remaining clenched fist of the replicate, which still held tight the power axe it had eluded. Tar spat.
Of course it's a power axe. The clone is going full Karn on this one.
More blood and coughed, crying out in defiance as the axe swung up and came down, burying itself deeply into the wall beside the Inquisitor's head.
Not so lucky there.
He felt the pressure lift from his broken hand, and his sword being kicked away as thick armored fingers wrapped around his throat and lifted. The replique was shorter than Tarweiler, yet left him dangling as he lifted the Inquisitor up into the rain. The clone wore no helmet, and from his eyes seemed to pour a steady stream of red blood.
Yeah, also, I have no idea where Fan got this image from. It looks really fucked up. Almost like Yuzon Vong inspired clone armor, or half and half. Creepy. But yeah, this is exactly who I think it is. This is the commander of the clone unit who has been steadily facing off against 1313 to start and then just being driven more and more insane as it goes. And now we see him fully embracing Khorne. Although fully might not be the right choice. I wonder what Weiler is going to think, because right now that could actually be very interesting to see how corrupted he is.
But it was not this, nor even the continuing flow of crimson essence which exited from the replica's missing right arm, which most concerned the Inquisitor. It was the burning, flaring...
1 second, got a cough. Sorry about that. I hate coughing on stream. Usually I try to edit those out when it happens.
orange and red malice which he saw glowing like embers in the false man's eyes.
Yep. Chaotic even.
Chaos!
Yep.
Tariler managed to choke past grit.
You brought it here.
Teeth. Acting with the typical arrogance of the great enemy, the clone confirmed his suspicions, the red
What
blood
did he say?
pouring out from his shoulder, congealing and thickening, becoming red bones, then sinew, and then reddened skin.
Oh, he's
all
actually
before
blood
their
healing.
eyes. The clone seemed
It's a good thing Korn hates all that sorcery stuff, otherwise this would be a little magic-y.
almost as shocked as Wyler was, opening and closing his new muscular limb before taking it and wrapping his freshly forged fingers around Wyler's throat, drawing
Yep.
him in closer towards the replica's bleeding face. He did not speak, and yet one word resounded so loudly within the mind of the transformed clone that
Blood?
Tarwyler could not help but hear it echoed within his own. A call, a summoning, a name.
Korn.
A fell name. A daemon's name. But not a daemon that the Inquisitor knew anything about.
Oh.
The name was powerful, primordial, yet alien and unknowable.
So he is full-on possessed then, that's why.
It was a name which held within it thousands of years of intense conflict, malice, and boundless, thirsting ambition. The
Are we
name
gonna name
pressed
demon?
into him mentally as the fingers around his throat dug deeper
Are
and
we?
deeper into his pale skin. Tar groaned, resisting both with his psychic might, yet finding that to halt the progress of one, he needed to permit the advance of the other.
What?
His mind alone
What?
was not a great enough force to overcome the hands of this cursed clone and the weight of its new malign god at once.
Is the name Korn or a demon under Korn that might be named that would possibly get into this situation without breaking it? It's less than a Primarch, so it wouldn't break the situation. Maybe Fen would actually let that happen. I was not expecting that.
He felt his strength failing and tried to call out, only for his voice to catch in his throat, unable to force itself up and out of his paling lips. The replicate grinned its own red monster's grin before it was suddenly struck hard across the face, its head snapping back violently as a bolt round took it in the temple, before a line of more micro-missiles ran down its body,
Oh.
each exploding
Huh.
loudly.
He's getting saved.
The clone was
Damn.
sent sprawling, as was Tarwyler, though to the Inquisitor's credit, he rolled himself into a low crouch, psychic force freezing and deflecting the rain which fell on and around him. The replicate around him raised rifles and began to fire, but not at him. The gun cutter swung in the air, engines scorching the rain into thick mist and steam, its turrets laying fire into the mass of clones. Bolters and heavy bolters on full blast. Even this carnage did not dissuade the Republic warriors.
They are very maddened right now. Also, I just love the fact that he's getting saved, because it's just one of those moments of he's the mastermind and his plans are all falling apart because other masterminds are intervening. I just love watching these people get their asses handed to them because someone just broke their plan a little. It's the same reason I like it when Palpatine's wrong. I love seeing those moments of, oh, fuck. It's fun.
Who only roared back at the flying craft as they leveled rifles and returned fire. The Inquisitor did not allow shock to stun him for long
The fuck?
and returned fire. The Inquisitor did not allow shock to stun him for long.
Not what Fan is saying, but the choice of music behind it going into a piano solo that's more light and airy. I feel like there's a transition in tone here that I'm just not sure about. I need to lean in for this to be extra serious.
who only roared back at the flying craft as they leveled rifles and returned fire.
What?
The Inquisitor did not allow shock to stun him for long, calling his sword back into his grip, holding it now in his left hand to spare the broken digits on his right, before getting up and running to skid and shelter behind a sloped embankment beside the outpost. He felt a cold, defeatist shiver run through his body as he flipped himself around and looked
Because he actually has to run.
Body flat against the side of the slope as he watched the cutter, hull blazing and guns firing erratically, spin out of the air above him and crash somewhere across the avenue from him.
Oh.
Its collision rocking the suspended street.
And that's where Lazarus was held unconscious. I really hope he survives this one.
He tightened his grip on the blade in his hand, waiting and watching grimly as the rounded, white silhouettes of the replicate began to crest the lip of the embankment, long rifles aimed down towards him. Their white and yellow helmets shone in the dim light that penetrated the curtain of rain, glowing more brightly as shining, arcing balls of light came into view over their shoulders.
Oh.
The replicate seemed to pause to observe these, and the Inquisitor grit bloody, broken teeth and took advantage of the second he was given, punching up with his broken hand and angling to fire another digital weapon. Yet before he or the clones above him could open fire, another hail of weaponized death crashed into the false men standing at the lip of the slope, scorching and burning them, forcing the clones back.
Oh.
The sudden volley of las fire had the Inquisitor spinning around, his wide black eyes reflecting the sight of speeding chimeras and running guardsmen, who hit the base of the embankment at a run, charging or rolling up with the roar of engines and the war cries of humanity.
Oh, see, this is something I love. It's not even that this... oh, wait, Lazarus was in a Thorax Prime transport? Huh. I guess there was multiple transports then. I figured I just had the wrong name then. Interesting. Because it was riding up the wall. And Xenodragon, evil equals fun. Yeah, I see where you're going with this one. It's all the evil people fighting each other. Zero air sport in the park. But these are still the Chaos clones. I assumed it was only the ones fleeing from the... Oh. I was under the assumption this was the fleeing Lazarus group, because that's where we saw the clones go mad and possessed. And he was just describing the location they were at as a park, even if it didn't quite seem like one. But if that's not the case, and this is still the same guy, that means they've been marauding around for an unspecified amount of time, have abandoned their post, or worse, it's spread. Spread is probably worse because it means it's a mimetic contagion. Where them just abandoning their post after not being able to catch their prey is more corny. I know what I did there, and I'm sticking to it.
The Inquisitor was stupefied. He had no idea who these people were even supposed to be.
Being saved by humans?
How could he have misplaced the position of yet another armed force of this size? The whole affair had him questioning how in control he really was.
Not very.
The sentiment only deepening as he heard the precise words of their war cry. For the Emperor! For the Imperium! For Saint Gaxian! They screamed into the rain as they poured in from around him.
Saint Gaxian? I mean, yeah, that's the guy on the bridge who pulled off the entire going to Force Ghost act, because he specifically dissolved at the end, and that's very much a thing in Star Wars. But he's already recognized as a saint? How? You know, this is probably just one of those things that Fan is hand-waving away. It happened in the background, but it's been, like, what, a couple days at most right now in this setting? If even that? Hell, I'm not even sure it's been a full day. So there's already people swearing by a saint who just died. Granted, he made one hell of an impression, but... Force Ghost can sometimes go actual ghosty and talk to people. Has he been acting in the background? I don't actually know.
Him, almost trampling Tar in their haste to meet the enemy in battle. One of them did stop, looming over the Inquisitor, the tall silhouette denoting the man as a commissar. The red-garbed man reached down, taking the Inquisitor roughly by the forearm and hauling him up to his feet. Inquisitor Tariler, I presume.
Oh,
the
he's
man
known.
Said. The Inquisitor nodded his head, standing up.
That is actually more surprising than anything else right now. Considering the interaction between Tariler and Leia earlier, and how he was just laughing off, oh, you think I'm on the Imperium side? And how he seemed very much poised to just pit everyone against each other. I always thought he was his own force and no one was aware of him. But it almost seems like he's just kind of like the crazy Inquisitor they're aware is there. I wasn't expecting people to know about him. I thought he would just be the madman that hides in the shadows, that no one is aware of. But I guess between the prison and people knowing him now, no. He's a very well-known source within the entire army then. Huh. That makes him a lot more visible than I was expecting.
Straighter and spitting to the side before responding in earnest.
Indeed, you have my gratitude, Commissar.
Terandor, the man said.
Terandor? As in, Command Squad Terandor? Weren't you and your whole column...
The Inquisitor began to say. Annihilated? Very nearly, Inquisitor. Very nearly. But no. As you can see, we still live. And we are still fighting. We'll try to secure the crew of that cutter we saw go down, but no promises. The Commissar said, striding forward and past the Inquisitor, power sword drawn, bolt pistol held tight in his other hand.
Wait, Commissar! Make sure to keep your men out of that outpost. That's an order.
Because
Tarweiler
they'd
said
find
to
his dirty
back.
little secrets there.
Terandor paused then, but did not turn back around. Acknowledged, Inquisitor. Will you be requiring anything else? He asked.
Yes.
Oh?
Weiler said,
The gun?
raising his voice to be
Or a
heard
sacrifice.
as another chimera creaked and wheeled up and past them to engage the enemy.
Who or what is Saint Gaxian?
Oh, you're cutting there? Oh, you son of a... Really? Out of all the times you could cut, you cut right when he's going to have it rubbed in his face like, hey, shit happened you weren't aware of. Oh! Clone Force 99. And Trashy? Who's Trashy? It's probably someone I've just missed or something.
How much Vodatech? The leader of Clone Force 99 asked. The wary clone commando subtly scanned their surroundings again as the four continued to follow the thumping, clunking wake of their hijacked servitor. Tech stood just behind it, holding a data pad which was linked into the back of the machine man's skull, viewing the contents of its mind, such as it was. He'd found that, by doing
Oh, the
this
server's
and
trashy?
fiddling with its thoughts for a bit, the brainy clone was now able to control the droid man almost as efficaciously as General Skywalker had.
Ew.
It also allowed him to view the route they were being taken down.
The fact that he's referring to the servitor as a man is actually making it worse because he thinks he's taking over a cyborg as opposed to a lobotomized meat puppet. Sorry, just my personal thing with cyborgs and servitors in here. The idea that they're mind wiped and basically dead, but the body keeps moving, it makes it a little less terrifying as opposed to the mind still being in there and screaming as their body is meat puppeted. It is just so much worse.
The squad was inside a narrow hallway, wide enough for the three of them to walk abreast. They passed in twos with the servitor leading the way. They would occasionally pass a few servants or crew, but they went mostly unnoticed, and thus far were unquestioned.
Because they have a servitor leading them, so they
Gradually,
blend
were
in.
finding themselves among more and more red and bronze effigies and icons, the symbol of a human skull split halfway between being bone and cybernetic being one of the most common.
Mechanicus section.
Are you sure you should be doing that so openly?
Nope.
Crosshair asked, just less than calmly.
Definitely not.
The common crew and inhabitants of the ship seem utterly unconcerned, and, indeed...
Wait, Scoshman in the chat said, Star Wars has lobotomized meat puppets too. One was in Solo. I never actually saw Solo, so I have no idea what's in that movie. It's one that I meant to get around to. I heard it was good. I just didn't. I'm really far behind. The last time I saw anything to do with Star Wars, it was probably The Last Jedi, which admittedly I thought was fun. It wasn't good, but it was generally fun. Honestly, most of the, I guess not the prequel trilogy, but like the Succession trilogy was just, it was fine, with the exception of the Casino. I could take that out and it would just be a fun movie series. Not good, but just it was good enough. With the exception of the Casino and the second movie and the third trilogy, because that one was actually shit. I don't mind this hyperspeed ramming. I mind the Casino because it was absolutely useless. But I could rant about that much longer. I won't. Need to see Solo, though, if they put some more interesting puppet aspects in there, just to make them more factor known.
Frightened by machines and technology. They did not question R2-D2, and I doubt they will question this. Tech said,
oh, yeah, they didn't
speaking
question
as though
R2,
he
did they?
were helpfully informing the cantankerous sniper.
Is he?
Doubt? Well, that sounds like strong judgment when it comes to risking our cover. The tall clone
I mean, he's not
snapped
wrong,
back.
though. Unless they catch
We
the wrong
needed
people.
a way to control the droid man now that the general went off on his own. Deal with it, Crosshair. And Tech, what about that ETA I asked for? Hunter said, interjecting before Wrecker thought of something unhelpful to add. The clones smiled and stood back as they rounded a corner. I think we are just about here, Sergeant, Tech said. Before them, the corridor widened and ended with an enormous door. It was massive, metal, and engraved in glorious fashion with the half-metallic, half-organic skull symbol they had found before. But they were not alone. Two droid men, much like the one who guided them, were stood to either side of the doors. Aside from being larger, these two new examples of the machine men differed in that they seemed primed for combat.
Oh,
Both
Skitari?
having an excess of red armored
Or
plating
Tex
and
Priest?
both wielding sparking, club-like weapons at the end of each arm in place of hands.
Electro Priest.
What now? Asked Crosshair.
Act natural.
Simple. I'll simply allow our half-machine friend here to continue on his way and grant us access. Those two guards up there ought to allow him and us to pass unmolested.
They better not molest us.
Wrecker said with a brooding.
Because they have the electro arms. He's making a... Oh my god, really? I'm sorry. It's not even that surprising. It's in character to hear that. I just wasn't expecting it, so it hit me as odd. Oh my god. Ugh.
Laugh, clapping his fist against his palm. What makes you so sure they won't get in our way, Tech? Hunter asked as they continued to approach. Well, our guide is returning here naturally, so I imagine he's allowed. As for us,
Are you,
I've
though?
noticed that, just like our droid man, all others we've seen thus far are subservient to humans, or at least ignore them. Without someone here to signal us out, or some alarm to let them know something is amiss, they will probably just let us go through, Tech explained. Hunter watched the two sentinels they were approaching, noting how their heads seemed to smoothly and mechanically track their approach. And you're certain about that? Hunter asked. Tech shrugged in response. Probably. Hunter sighed at that answer and lifted his hand, signaling silently for Crosshair and Wrecker to hang back, which they did, both shouldering their weapons. Okay, Tech, unplug from that thing for now, Hunter said softly. Tech looked at him with a perplexed expression.
Because he's expecting that if they look like they're controlling him, they might notice. Also, I'm being told it's combat servitors, not tech priests. Okay, that makes a little more sense. Oh, that would be the big... Would that be the robots then? Or still smaller? I don't know much about combat servitors, other than I don't like using them. Partially because the points are horrible.
Whatever for?
Always have been.
He asked. Because I don't think it's a good idea to be right next to him while he opens that door. So hang back with me. We'll catch up if it all looks up to standard. Hunter
So they don't
said.
get caught in an impossible shot.
Tech shrugged, but did as ordered, unplugging his datapad from the back of its neck and allowing the servitor to progress several feet in front of them before resuming his approach. The guards tracked their guide, following the closest person to the door, but did nothing as the droid man trundled up to the access panel in the front of the entryway, using a jack on his sucking arm to interface with it. Hunter and Tech stood back, waiting, their brothers doing the same behind them. Some time passed, and then there was a chime, and the door hissed and slid open.
Yeah, that actually worked.
Tech smiled.
It worked so
"See?
far. Something's
Nothing
about to go
worry
wrong.
about," he said as he started.
Why would you say that? I mean, wow, Fanny, if you were trying to highlight that this is about to go horrible, that's actually really well done. That is actually the best way to do it. You build up the expectation that things aren't going to work by having people talk about how it's not something you should be aware of, how you need to take a little more caution. And then if you don't have something then break when things start to look like they're going right, it feels like you're letting it down because the scene doesn't make sense anymore because you have to show the complication. Because if you just show things working like normal, it wasn't worth showing. At least in this style of story. Stories that are more lighthearted or slice of life can show things working like normal as a way just to show another example of what's going on. But especially right now where we're showing a conflict, if this didn't break down, it would actually make no sense. So, good choice.
Forward. He was halted as the two sentinel droid men to either side of the door unleashed horrible half-man, half-mechanical screams and
Screaming
leapt from their
servitors. Oh, I didn't
positions,
know about
both
that.
landing near their brainwashed guide. The trash-sucking droid man was beheaded by the first sparking strike of the assailing mace hands. But the two attackers did not stop after just that. Ruthlessly beating the docile man-machine into sparking paste before jerking their faces, each one crammed with optic sensors, in the direction of Clone Force 99.
Are they doing that because they know he's been co-opted? Or because they were just put down here to purge? I don't know, and frankly, it's the Imperium. It could go either way.
Trashy, no! Wrecker cried from behind the first two clones. In the same moment, the large metal doors began to squeal and slowly close behind the pair of hostile servitors. Go
Oh, there
now!
goes their lift.
Hunter yelled, drawing his vibroblade and dashing forward. Clone Force 99 moved not a heartbeat behind. Tech drawing his blaster pistols, and all four charging down the hallway towards the droidmen, even as the droidmen wheeled about, charging them back an instant later. Bird-like mechanical legs stomped in terrifying tandem as the servitors came for them, side by side. Mace arms held up and out to swing. Tech opened fire, but found his blaster bolts bouncing and glinting off the thick red armor the two droid men were encased in. Crosshair, running while sighting down the targets on his scope, saw and noted that, also noting that they were not armored in their entirety. Their ears seeming to be a spot of lessened armored protection.
Ah. I have no idea what model this is from, so I'm assuming it's Forge World. The fact that it has a death mask on it is freaky. This is very much servitor-ish. And is this Kit Bash, though?
Factoring that into his approach, he tossed out his thumb-sized deflector discs, sending out the small, magnetized plates like shuriken, adhering them to specific spots
Kit Bash
along
ripoff?
the wall.
Yeah.
He hardly waited after tossing before firing his shots, aiming at the discs he'd thrown, causing his blaster bolts to bounce off the walls on either side of them. The blaster bolts went wide before bouncing back in, striking both servitors on the outward-facing sides of their heads almost simultaneously.
I'm sorry, did he just... He just bounced laser fire or blaster fire. What?
The blaster bolts went wide before bouncing back in.
He is bouncing bullets
on the outward-facing sides of their heads almost simultaneously.
Okay.
Armored enough to survive the shots, but not enough to avoid staggering and crashing into each other. Hunter and Tech made running leaps, clearing the man-machines in a single bound. Hunter taking the head off of the leftmost one in the process with his vibroblade, cutting through the thing's craned neck with one precise slice. Crosshair likewise leapt over the heap of man-machines, the single intact servitor managing to rise halfway to its feet, before Wrecker kicked it in the head. His Katarn-class battle armor cracking loudly against the ceramite plating of the servitor just before its head was sent careening into the ceiling.
Damn.
That was for Trashy!
Wrecker spat.
Wrecker, hurry up or you'll end up like Trashy.
Crosshair called, getting the big man's attention just in time. The large doors slid shut a second after Wrecker squeezed past, the four taking quick stock before looking around. The area around them was vast and seemed like some chaotic mishmash of a religious temple and a mechanic's bay or laboratory.
Oh,
The
they're
ceiling
very
was
much in the heart of
high,
the
and
Mechanicus
the
section.
space was crammed with arcane machinery, leaving all four clones gawking for a couple moments.
Oh, what kind?
Whoa!
Well, they wouldn't
I
understand
bet
it
I could
anyway.
make a really loud echo in here, said Wrecker.
Oh my god.
What now?
I'm sorry, but Wrecker is literally just that burst of dopamine I wasn't expecting to get from this show, but I'm loving this right now. Every time he speaks, it's just lighthearted, and I just love them. I never got to the Bad Batch. I'm still so far behind in Clone Wars. I started watching it because of this series, but I need to get further into it. But is he like that in the actual show? Because if he is, I need to get there faster.
Asked Crosshair. Good question. Tech? Added Hunter. Tech seemed almost lost as he observed the area.
Would he
Data
recognize
streaming
this stuff?
across his goggles in thick, revealing trails. Tech? Hunter asked again. What? Oh, right. The brainy clone
Is he
said,
having a
snapping
geek out?
back to the mission. Now we find an access terminal and find out where they are controlling the bomb on an axis. Then we disable it, recover the general, and extract, he informed.
Simple.
Right. Stay close and keep your eyes sharp. Just finding the general after this is going to be a chore. So let's not waste any time. Let's locate that access terminal.
I don't know what he's talking about. Finding Anakin's always really easy. You look for the biggest explosion, and he's usually there. Tell me I'm wrong. We all know that is unfortunately a very accurate way to describe finding Anakin. Well, there's an explosion. He's probably over there. It's not wrong. I'm going to stand by this one. I'm not going to die on this hill because I don't think I need to. It's very accurate, and I don't even think people would disagree.
Said Hunter, and without another word, Clone Force 99 proceeded into the bizarre machine temple.
Also, Xenodragon just pointed out that we've had an hour-long stream without Comcast crashing on me. Yeah, I know. It's weird. I was actually expecting the stream to end by now because I literally stopped having internet. This is a nice surprise. That said, this video goes up until the end instead of having a random cut here, so I might not be able to finish it today just because I don't want to press my luck too far. That said, I want to get as far as I can because this is good. And Scotchman, Wrecker is a man-child who get along with Ogren. Oh, God. The Ogren are like the best boys, though, in the Imperium. On the one hand, it's been an hour. It hasn't crashed. My internet's holding up. On the other hand, I have Comcast. I'm not sure if that will last. Honestly, I want to do more. I think I got time to do more for one state, which is weird. But if my previous dozen streams are any indication, that is going to change soon. Hell, that's one of the reasons I started at 11 a.m. on my time to see if I had it. I probably have to end the stream because there's no way that's going to keep up. The one thing I absolutely hate is when a stream ends because it just stops working. I'm going to put up a quick poll in the chat, see what everyone thinks. And, well, let's see. Start a poll. Going to create this quickly. Here we go. All right, so for everyone watching live, I have a poll going up in the chat right now. I have Staram, because I can't spell apparently. End it here and keep going and risk internet issues. So far, it looks like end it here is at 50%. Keep going is at 80%. Uh-oh, we're going. 81%. Ooh, still going up. Looks like most people wanted me to risk the internet issues. I personally don't mind this option, but I just want to make sure people are aware. If that happens, I'm probably going to not realize right away. The stream will crash and I might finish the video and then it just won't be seen by anyone. Because that has happened multiple times. It's one of the reasons I don't usually do reactions live to things I actually enjoy a lot. But on the other hand, I'm going to leave this up to everyone in the chat. Right now we have 27 to end it here, 73 to keep it going, with 26 votes out of the 76 concurrent viewers. Also, holy shit, there's 76 concurrent viewers. God damn. Also, just want to shout out to Xenodragon once again for the 5 new members he gifted. Thank you very much, man. That actually is a huge help. Just getting more people into the memberships in general is always really cool. Because it's like, hey, see? I get notifications more often now that I can specifically check out when they leave comments, so it's easier for me to just notice in general. And that is actually one of the reasons it's really helpful. Ripoff Productions, am I recording my end? No, because I've tried before. It always corrupts. I have a setting wrong somewhere, and I don't know which one it is. If I looked it up, I can fix that. Need to do that. Haven't done that yet. All right. So I'm going to say in the first minute, about a third of the people have voted already, and we got at 73% to keep going. I think that's pretty good right now. I think we have our answer. We're going to keep going. Let's hope I don't regret this because the stream immediately crashes. If it does, just start spamming F in the chat because I'll get there's a meme going on and realize something broke. Iskandar and Anakin. Or Anakin and Iskandar.
Void yourself.
What?
Said Shala, her voice loud enough to be heard over the senseless bleeding of the dampeners which sat nearby.
What?
The screeching voxes forced most words to be understood by lip reading, but not those words.
Void yourself?
Oh, come on, Shal. You lost fair and square, said the sneering, one-eyed man who sat across from her. Void yourself, she repeated, enunciating visibly and strongly with each word, making sure Gojin could read her lips. Shala's cold eyes regarding her fellow blank with nothing short of obvious contempt.
Oh, it's the blanks. You know, I'm actually surprised here. I wasn't expecting them to be held in a position where they could actually still speak or to do a game where they could actually lose. Huh. Most people, I would assume, would just chain the blank up and surgically insert needles into them so that they are kept alive and then just screaming and suffering because that seems to be how the Imperium works. This is actually surprising.
Well, you did agree to strip if you lost the game, said Jonna,
oh, it's actually strip
the broad
poker.
Woman smiling no less lecherously than one-eyed Gojin. Shala's face reddened the barest amount. She was reminded again, as she almost constantly was, of what the others in her unit preferred to and were encouraged to do whenever not on duty.
What?
Normally,
encouraged?
just the sight of her would repulse other beings, and touching her was a cold experience, no matter how warm she actually was. But not here. Blanks could not feel their own blankness, and so it followed that they did not feel that of others either. And placing a bunch of touch-starved degenerates like them in one place was already an open invitation to the collapse of all moral and physical discipline.
Ah! We have reached the blank breeding program. Anakin walking in on whatever is about to happen is going to be a very interesting time, and he might have to explain it to Padme. This Kender got nothing on whatever is about to happen to him. This is not safe for him. Oh, God. I mean, it makes sense. The Imperium needs a stream of blanks, and, yeah. And, you know, Dragon is just asking where my wife is right now. Thankfully, I'm pretty sure she's still taking a nap, so I should be safe. And the door is closed for once because I didn't forget, unlike last night when I recorded and forgot.
Throw in the fact that their inquisitorial sponsor actively encouraged such practices, and the result was obvious. Shala and Jogna were the only two females left in their unit who were not on maternity leave. While Shala did not
They get maternity leave? Wow. Sorry, I just didn't realize anyone got any type of leave in the Imperium at all. If the Inquisitor running this prison is the one I think it is, he is very much a radical because this is not normal. Huh. So normally I already mentioned that Inquisitors are just giant piles of war crimes inbound, which everyone is talking about, and that's what I expected. I expected them to be chained up and suffering and screaming in agony because that's how most things are done in 40K. Even if they're valuable. But apparently, a blank pit is a orgy. Not what I was expecting. Also, maternity leave. The fact that they get it is weird.
shun intimacy herself, she had no interest in playing the role of an anti-psyker broodmare for Inquisitor Weiler.
And it is Weiler.
And even if she did want to experiment with that kind of experience, Gojin was among the last of all human beings on her list of all possible people that she would ever share a bed with. Maverick, R9, and Jolas were not far behind on that list either. Mercifully, only Maverick was present from that mismanaged compilation of character flaws. As for Jogna, she was still here because she had no interest in men, but a very particular interest in Shala.
Ah.
She felt a shiver cleave its way down her spine as Jogna licked her lips.
Okay, they're all thirsty for her.
No, I did not, Shala said in defense of herself, speaking coldly and logically. Gojin suggested it. You agreed and pushed me into this chair. Then Maverick tossed out hands to everyone, and you both told me we were playing 7 Stakes, when we were actually playing Fortress. Shala explained curtly. Maverick's
And they also set her up to lose. Ah, yeah, they're all degenerates.
bespectacled face bounced up from his cards, looking confused and dismayed all at once.
Wait, we're not playing 7 Stakes.
Oh, he actually thought it
asked
too?
No one in particular. Shala felt her hand slap her face, palm resting over one eye. No, you must have misheard it. Damn dampening voxes, lied Gojin, laughing, adding his
What
own
the
horrid
hell art is
noise
Fan
to the
using?
constant sound. Shala closed her eyes and took a breath, letting the cacophony eat up everything else, turning the chaos into tranquility.
I have some questions, and Fan, between the Imperial March, talking about strict poker, and then bringing up, it looks like early 90s GW art that's really on par with some of the meme images from Spider-Man. You know the one I'm talking about, with all the boys smiling in a circle. It's Rogue Trader era art. Yeah, that looks about right. It is, this is weird. And also, he almost looks like a design that they later used for the Tau.
At least for a few seconds. She knew the logical explanation for the Vox dampeners. They existed to prevent any of the prisoners above them from screaming or transmitting any sound that could reach them. Her mind was warded from direct psychic information, but there were many things in the great void of creation that mankind was never.
Because even if they're blanks, that doesn't mean they're immune. It just dampens it. And something strong enough, like what they're containing, would be able to fuck them up. Or, mimetic audio issues, because it doesn't happen often, but those kind of SCP level things do also exist in 40K. They're just not usually used as much because they're hard to represent on the tabletop.
Meant to know. She actually appreciated the precaution when she had first been recruited. Now, she often found herself wondering what would actually drive her mad first. The discordant sounds firing from the Vox, or an actual eldritch secret. Unfortunately,
Secret, actually,
she had
yeah.
also concluded that it was a moot point, since she would be driven to a bloody rampage by her companions far before either of those two options could rend her mind. She opened her eyes, returning to the irritating chatter she had been forced to be a part of, only to find herself staring at something she did not understand. Gojin was gasping, coughing. The smell of burning human began.
So the reason the dampener went off is because they had a bunch of sound of them breaking through the floor. Oh, that actually is a beautiful way to make it a dramatic introduction. And she established that it would dampen it because otherwise they would hear them cutting through and breaking in. But because they have that way, fan create a situation where we can have that dramatic pause to go, what? And have the reveal of a lightsaber.
And to filter into the room. Gojin sat directly across from her. His chair almost leaned against the wall, the emergency alert switch sitting beside his head. A large, red button adhered to the steel behind him by wires, cables, and metal paneling. There was something coming out of the wall now, piercing through the back of Gojin's chair and through his chest.
Yep.
A blue beam? It was like a humming bar of energy.
A lightsaber.
Like a blade of
and they wouldn't be
melted
aware of
discharge
these yet
held
either,
suspended in time. But one thing was clear and becoming clearer by the second. It was killing Gojin. The sound from the Voxes was such that Maverick and Jogna, who had been staring at her, had not even noticed the emergence of the blade until it looped in a circle, slicing open the wall of the room and taking off Maverick's arm at the shoulder as it...
Oh, so that wasn't even intentional. They just got really lucky to take one of the blanks out. Oh. And the noise canceling is going around so they can't even hear the blade through the wall cutting him up. Dude, that's insane. And no wonder they're playing the Imperial March. It's that little key to let us know that Anakin is about to go full on terrifying Vader moment. Oh, also, Xenodragon in the chat. Why did you write, you just thought Jar Jar Binks of as a chaos god? I mean, there is a significant theory that Lucas was initially aiming as Jar Jar as the Phantom Menace, and that's what the point of the show was, or the entire title, and then it was changed because, unlike Yoda, Jar Jar's reception was, why is this a thing? And then he kept Jar Jar as the idiot everyone hated as a direct F you to the fans. Or because he still found it amusing and was like, yeah, screw it, we're going to drop that plot line, just leave it this way. I don't know. But it seemed like it would be really interesting considering people have done mapping of the movements to show that Jar Jar was actually doing the drunken monkey fighting style lifted directly from one-to-one comparisons, which is weird, but maybe it's not. Is Fan using that interpretation though? That I'm actually curious about.
It did. Gojin died, falling into 4 pieces as he was bisected and delimbed by the weapon's arc.
Yep.
His upper torso falling forward onto the table and cards, his lower parts remaining seated as his arms dropped
And they'll suddenly
away,
feel a little
single
less
eye
pressure
wide
from the
and
blanks there.
blind as he collapsed. Jogna kicked back and away, her trained muscles cording in learned behaviors and moving before any of them. Maverick followed, falling out of his chair, screaming his lungs raw as he hit the ground and flailed mindlessly, cupping the burnt stump of his severed arm, legs kicking as his eyes rolled in pained frenzy. Shala, for her part, was frozen by the whole event. What was happening? They were under attack?
Yeah.
Why had the attack come through the wall and not the ceiling? Her thought process was cut down as the blade withdrew from the molten circle it had carved, the slice then ejecting outward, blowing Gojin's scattered pieces away, along with the table and chairs they had been sitting at. She would have been among those things that were tossed aside, had Jogna not grabbed her roughly by the hem of her uniform and hauled her out of the path of danger.
Damn.
Shala flinching at the sensation of the wind whipping off the makeshift metal battering ram that had nearly crushed her. Maverick rose then, still screaming as he pounded his fist into the alarm button on the wall, slamming it again and again.
Not gonna help.
No alarm sounded. The box had been nearly bisected by the blade of blue light which came through the wall, and the damage had been sufficient to disable the button.
Fan is doing such a great job of giving Anakin the gravitas that came later with Vader. Even though technically Anakin was less powerful that way, and I put the air quotes in there because it does not ever get displayed that way, except when you compare the fight against Luke against the fight against anyone else, but that's just a technical difference. It does show that impending just sweep of destruction Anakin is capable of, but we don't usually see when we're looking from his perspective in the Clone Wars, because we see his perspective, we see what he's up against, as opposed to looking at him as the monster we get when he's more Vader. But this is really showing that entire, yes, Anakin is already at the level of, oh, fuck. And that's not even taking into account, he's not alone right now with someone who probably can hold his own and beat him, if not heavily restrained. Although the fact that Anakin can still do things right now is in its own right terrifying, and probably very well considered by Iskandar.
Still, there was another button in the room. Shala felt herself thinking distantly. Another alarm switch by the door. But she had barely finished thinking that before they were under attack again. Maverick folded in half, sliced all the way through by a man holding a blue blade.
Yep.
A scar under blonde hair, eyes fierce and
That's
almost
Anakin.
luminous. He whipped his arms around, his blade of heretical light scything through the surrounding dampeners and bringing them to silence. "Get the alarm! Get the alarm!" Jogna bellowed, tossing Shala backwards towards the door as she reached for the pistol and knife at her belt. She managed to get her blade free, raising in time to watch it be hacked in half by the strike of the intruder, who cut through the steel effortlessly, dividing Jogna's face in half with the same movement. And
damn. And yeah, it's not a daycare, but I guess a little before that with how they were talking about prior. And yeah, Fen definitely made the right choice to go with a moment of levity as the way to introduce it, to show a non-serious moment being interrupted by a serious moment, to give some humanity to the people who are blanks, which in its own right is a weird thing to say, considering blanks are usually considered soulless monstrosities, both in canon, in lore, and how they're depicted. Most of the time. I mean, there's also blanks who are main characters, but they're always depicted as slightly off-putting to some people because of blank status.
And killing her instantly. But Shala did not see that happen, scrambling on her hands and knees towards the door, breath rasping out of her in desperation. The Jedi behind her had time to react, to throw his saber to intercept, but hesitated at the notion of striking a crawling, helpless combatant from behind. That moment...
Huh. I was not expecting that. Excuse me. I want to hear that again.
Of striking a crawling, helpless combatant from behind.
Huh. I mean, I have no doubt Iskandar's going to finish her off if Anakin doesn't, but the fact that Anakin isn't so far gone right now that he wouldn't kill her is actually better than I was expecting. I thought Fan was depicting him as so far gone already that it's not a very big push from him into Vader at this point, and that's what he was going to aim for, because Vader is a cool one to work with. But if he hasn't already reached that point, maybe something else is going to be what tips him over. So he's not actually at the tipping point yet, he's still before it. It's more just a moment right now where I'm realizing that I was miscalibrating where I thought Anakin was in his own progression downhill. Why is chat saying there's a fetish incoming? You know what? I'm just going to ignore this right now. There's probably...
That moment of morality was all Shala needed to activate the alarm. But while Anakin hesitated,
Iskandar
did not.
Yeah.
Emerging from the hole in the wall like a raven's shadow, the armless Marine sped from the breach at an unnatural pace, catching her head between his splayed toes and slamming it into the wall, dazing and pinning her there.
Ew.
Kaon balanced on one foot, his other raised, dexterous beyond what most would expect.
Oh,
of
it's
a
the
creature
step
so
on me, that's
large
why.
and so wounded to be capable of. She grunted in pain, teeth clenched together, hard breaths gusting spit and drool from her mouth as his foot crushed her against the wall.
Yeah.
She opened bleary eyes, and there could see it, the button.
Forgive me, Shala.
What?
Said the fallen Astartes, the literal demon who held her tight between the digits of his feet.
How the hell does he know her name? Or did the psychic power weaken enough that he could just pull it?
Had I arms, my balance would have allowed me to crush your skull instantly. There would have been no pain. But I'll do my best to make it quick.
He said. Her heart was pain.
Also, one, Chaos Sorcerer caring about pain. As in not causing it. I realize this is someone's OC Do Not Steal that was canonized, is how people were explaining it to me, and admittedly, yeah. Specifically, I think it was Aaron Dembski-Bowden's OC Do Not Steal. But it's weird hearing that kind of concern, even faked or not. It might be faked for Anakin's benefit. It's very much weird. Granted, this is a very weird character.
Painfully pounding in her chest, her blood ice and fire conjoined by sheer, unspeakable panic. But through it all, she could see it. The button, the alarm. She reached for it with her free hand, and Kaon twisted his foot. Crack! Shala's arm fell limp,
Yep.
far short of her goal.
Broken spine.
And the sense of her body left her. But she did not die.
What?
Still seeing from her eyes, neck broken, but still alive. A new utter horror began
God,
to
that's
fill
horrible.
her up. Kaon
Suffocation.
bent his knee, bringing his head closer to hers.
I am sorry.
He said, letting her collapse to the ground, something she could only feel from her head as she hit the floor like a sack of potatoes.
There's no way he wasn't aware that he only broke her spine, not killed her, though. But didn't do it in such a way that she's not dying. Oh, dear God. Oh, hey, a fan with too much time's here. And you missed the start. Don't worry, it was only an hour and a half ago. Sorry, man. I didn't tag you, did I? Oops. You didn't miss anything. It's just me geeking out over everything that happened previously. It was awesome. Is he intentionally just leaving her there? Because I thought dead had to be a part of that, considering the entire null aspect was part of them being alive, not just being bodied.
Dazed just enough by the impact to not
Now
see
she won't
or
feel the pain.
understand Kaon's descending heel
Once
as
it's on
he
the head.
crushed her head against the floor, gore churning and
Yep.
spattering. Ugh. Anakin groaned, wiping bloody gray matter from his robe.
Yeah.
Was that really necessary? Anakin asked.
Nope. But it felt
Kaon
good.
nodded without orienting towards him.
Yes.
He said with certainty. Not the stomp, Kaon. The wall. I could have just cut us out from the ceiling, and it would have taken us 3 minutes instead of 15. Anakin said, rolling his shoulders.
Really?
And
That's the
flexing
part?
his legs.
Impatient.
Perhaps. But the ceiling is reinforced with adamantium. Even if your weapon could cut through it, I doubt it would have managed it quickly enough to avoid raising the alarm.
I normally would agree with him, and I'm not sure if he's aware of the noise dampeners, but considering they didn't even notice the beam, it's entirely possible they might not have if they didn't get hit by it or have anything fall at the time. Huh. That'd actually be really funny if it did, but probably break immersion if Van had tried to go that way. Also, considering fans in the chat right now, I realize how awkward it is talking about his writing style. Granted, I do it anyway, so nothing new there.
Given the choice between the two,
Kaon began to explain. Better to be crammed into the walls for 15 minutes than crammed into this room with the rest of the ship, Anakin concluded. The Chaos Space Marine nodded. Okay, fine. Then where to next? Where are they keeping this weapon of yours? Anakin asked, leaning against the wall and taking a deep breath. He could feel the force returning to him, but it was still smothered, only about 1/10 of the connection he felt normally.
How many more are there?
Kaon nodded his head and walked into the center of the room, seeming to pause and think.
this wall.
He said after
They
a
kept it
time
next to
had
them?
passed.
That makes
behind
sense,
that
actually.
wall?" Anakin asked.
Best way to suppress something is put it right next to the blanks.
Said Kaon. Anakin sighed heavily. "We don't have time for vengeance. Not right now. We need to get to this armory as quickly as possible, and preferably
one
without
chaos
killing
stone.
our way to it, if we can avoid it." He said.
I agree.
Said the sorcerer.
But to reach and use the weapons I need, we're going to have to create a free space. Even the bodies of these blanks are still suppressing our abilities.
Oh, really?
Killing them all will be the bare minimum of what we will require to escape. There is no other way.
Also, I know Fan is doing the voice for him in such a way to make it offsetting because sorcerer, chaos, and crazy. And it probably wouldn't be so bad if I was listening on speakers, but on headphones right now, hearing the voice just go all like a little bit here, a little bit there, and then having all the different aspects of it just jumping around, it is incredibly off-putting to hear. And I don't mind it as an effect, but I don't mind it as an effect a little. I almost wish he had like toned it up immediately and then toned it down to something more even just to make the hearing aspect easier. I'm not sure how well that'll come across in everyone else because I don't think I have things set up in such a way that it would have three-dimensional sound in anyone else's audio. But on mine, I can get that, and it is really freaking off-putting and weird. Again, probably intentional because off-putting and weird character in general. But wow, does that just have an extra layer of effect on his entire existence when he speaks? And Fan just said, "Oh man, wish I was sick, laughing my ass off. Makes listening harder."
He explained.
I wish you
Anakin
weren't
shook
sick.
his head.
I
"This
hope you
will
feel better,
take
man.
Too long, and besides, each time we breach and attack a room, there will be a chance that they raise the alarm, and then it's more or less over," he reasoned.
Again, I do not deny it. But that is a chance we will have to take. Unless you can think of another way of clearing the warp suppression from the area around us.
Kaon
Murder?
countered. Anakin paused at that, thinking, and only growing more frustrated as he came up with nothing better.
He has no idea how it works
All
yet,
right.
so...
I see no other way. But if we are doing this, then you're going to need to help me, he said. Kaon raised his eyebrows over his stitched eye sockets.
I thought I already was.
Don't say offering a hand, don't say offering a hand, don't say offering a hand. Oh god, please don't say it. It's such a bad joke. They already made it the last episode. Oh. Also, Fanny said sorry because your experiment with audio results vary. Honestly, no, it's not a bad result. I think it's pretty good. It's just, it's very off-putting, and I think that's done intentionally, but also it's still off-putting on top of that. Not bad, though.
He said mildly. No, not like that. You said you were, like me. Warp-sensitive person, right? Anakin asked. Kaon nodded almost without thinking.
Yes, but now...
He started to say, now you have these rods pushed into you that are keeping you from accessing it. Anakin concluded. Again.
Considering people in the chat are talking about unironic or unintentionally not YouTube appropriate situation inbound. And they're talking about the rod shoved into Iskander. We're going into that situation. Oh my.
Kaon nodded. Then it's obvious what we have to do. We have to pull them out, said the Jedi, reaching for one such rod protruding from the man's shoulder.
Where are they tied to?
Blind Kaon did not realize what he was doing right away, not until he sensed the movement near his body.
Wait, General, do not touch them!
He barked out, but too late. Anakin's gloved hand wrapped around the black metal, gripping it tightly. But before he could pull on it, it pulled on him.
That.
The effect was almost instantaneous, making the Jedi sway in a sudden, dazed fugue.
Because it's
he had
sucking
the
away the
distinct
soul.
feeling of being a vessel filled with himself and now rapidly draining into the rod. What was this metal? What he had taken to be some kind of element suddenly struck Anakin as undeniably technological.
Necron shit.
Yes, he could feel it. This metal, this black stone, was not mystical in nature, nor was it even an element of any single material. It seemed not to move at all as it drained out his soul. But the Chosen One could feel the buzzing, the churning, the maze of microscopic complexity within the rod.
Oh.
Which seemed to physically drag his force potential within, biting like a swarm of 1 billion ants, all acting with an intelligent design, but lacking intelligence of their own.
See, this is actually fascinating to me because it's literally him describing the impression of Necron technology and its inner workings based on it siphoning his own power from him, which we know would mean the soul, but at the same time, not always the soul, considering 40K might be moving away from that description due to how they're interpreting the not warp psychic powers of the Sisters of Battle in the Pariah Nexus. It's weird, and I'm not sure they know what they're doing either yet.
Kaon jerked away, but Anakin's hand was deadlocked around the bar, and he pulled them both along as he did.
Did he pull it out?
General, let go. You will drain yourself beyond recovery. Release me now.
Kaon roared, shaking his shoulders, yet still unable to dislodge him.
Kaon! What is this?
Anakin growled through grit teeth.
Okay, one, Fan, you have to be aware of what choosing this specific image would do. Not just the Anakin in pain thing, and probably needing a body help after this because he's hurting himself, but because showing the half Vader mask in there, just Vader baiting. Just so much Vader bait. Right down master of it.
These rods are Blackstone. They can empower or completely subdue any psychic presence they come in contact
Empower?
with. You
Oh, I
need
didn't
to
know
let
about that
go,
part.
or you will be of no use to either of us.
The Marine growled back. But Anakin was barely listening by the end of his story.
Yeah, that's Anakin, all right.
Sagging against the Chaos Space Marine, breath rapidly becoming shallow. The rod was devouring him. He needed to escape it, but it truly felt as though his soul were dragged out of him and forced.
It's only because people made the comments about the unintentionally not YouTube appropriate situation. I don't think this is what they meant, but now it's in my head, and all I'm thinking is, you know, there's a lot of segments of this that if you just took a sound bit, it would sound so much more sus.
Possibly flattened. He puffed a hard breath out through his nostrils before straightening and pulling as hard as he could.
Oh, he's still going.
Kaon roared in pain, falling to his knees as the rod was hauled on, its cold length remaining firmly buried in his flesh. Anakin yanked once.
Oh, I really hope my wife doesn't join us right now. Oh, God, I don't just... Oh, wow. Really trying for that R rating, huh, Fan? I get the scene's really intentional and it's actually really well done, but choosing the word rod, while accurate,
And then twice, but his hand refused to let go and the Blackstone would not budge. Why was his hand malfunctioning like this? His other hand was opening and closing easily,
Is
and
this the
Kaon
robot
did
one?
not seem to be suffering from this kind of effect. So why?
He has more to
thought
drain, maybe?
himself, Was it because his hand was mechanical? Was it reacting somehow
Oh.
with the technology of the rod? With that thought, Anakin changed his tactic.
What? Okay, so one, it was the mechanical hand, and two, the idea that technology would react to Necron shit, that has implications that I have no idea how to approach. Because Necrons have ability to do bullshit levels of anything they want when it comes to tech. And usually they just don't because not worth it. Except for, certain people who like to make museum exhibits out of everything. But the fact that it would interact with tech from the Star Wars side is actually more surprising. Huh.
Calming for a moment and closing his eyes, shuddering from head to toe. These rods were machines. He was sure of it. He could feel it. And if they were machines, then he was certain he could tamper with it, reprogram it even, if not just disassemble it. He reached out with his mind, going towards instead of away from the rod, entering within it voluntarily.
Is he force hacking a Necron artifact? Okay, that right there means that it's a good thing Necrons aren't around because one, they would immediately target him to be killed, or two, immediately target him to be put into a museum because he's way too fascinating not to. Because, god damn! Necron tech, when fully unleashed, is scary. Like some of the celestial orreries where they just pluck a little representation of a planet or a sun out, and then it actually dies in real life. That is not a level of tech that you want to fuck with. Now, it's not that level of what they're dealing with, but this is... Kaelin just said they could empower. What happens if Anakin flips the switch? And Fan is now denying that rods are rods. What should I have used? The word poles instead? Wow, there is no winning here. Construct. You use the word construct. It's a nice generic one that has enough syllables that it doesn't slip off the tongue nearly as easily.
The sensation was like being covered in meticulous, cruel swarms of insects.
Accurate considering how they do
Each
things.
one going to work on him, devouring and reducing his connection to the Force. Separating him. He had only seconds.
What are you doing?
The stupid.
Kaon barked.
It's very
Be
Anakin.
quiet! Anakin snapped, eyes closed, face lined with concentration and dripping with sweat. The metal hand creaked, tightening and tightening, overloading as a stream of metaphysical power moved down through it and into the rod. Power built within it, but it was not the strength of the Force which made the difference, but the mindset of the user.
Oh?
Memories of crafting circuits, of insulating parts,
Because
of
he's a
learning
tech
what had
genius.
never been taught, filled Anakin's mind. C-3PO had been the first great result of his natural technical ability, conjoined with his...
I mean, on the one hand, yeah, C-3PO for a kid making was great. On the other hand, you really want to claim that's the first great one? I get the fans doing that there, and I think this is perfectly in line with Anakin's character to make that claim, especially at this point. It's just considering C-3PO is so C-3PO, it's just funny that he would internally consider it that way. I don't think fans are wrong. I think this is a perfectly accurate to character description. I just find it funny. And fan said, cylindrical construct. Our ratings are so easy to get nowadays. Yes, they are. Oh, God. I'm giving him a hard time, but frankly, it does sound really bad. I wouldn't have thought of that except for chat going crazy about how it's unintentionally not safe for work. I would not have made that connection otherwise, and I'm going to pretend that's the case.
his status within the Force. Now, in this moment, in this dark place, came the second. The rod seemed to thunk, but not physically. Kaon felt it more than he heard it, and then heard Anakin gasp loudly, feeling the weight on his shoulder lessen as the Jedi managed to release him at last and fall away. But Kaon's attention was immediately shifted away as a new sensation permeated his shoulder
What
and
did
sank
he
into
do
him.
to it?
His empty, stitched eyes widened and strained as he felt power flowing and circulating within him. It had been so long, but it was not the same. It took Kaon a few moments to actually understand what the Jedi...
Because he hasn't been feeling the warp, but he's not in the same warp where the demons are there, so he's literally in an untainted version. And unlike the Imperium Psychers, who are made a point to never touch it and feel it, they always have to filter it to the point where they control it to keep the literal demons gnawing on their soul out. He doesn't do that because he's a chaos sorcerer, so he would actually notice it right away when he draws on it. Oh, he's going to see that there's a lot of fuck-uppery going on right now.
Jedi had managed to do. Sorry about that. I didn't realize, Anakin began to say, sitting on the ground, coated in cold sweat and looking paler than was healthy.
You reversed its polarity.
Turned it
You
around.
changed the black stone from a suppressive force like those of the pylons on dead Cadia to an amplifying force.
So it's not just feeling the force, it's feeling that it's now being amplified beyond that. Okay, that's actually even more impressive.
Like those found on Blackstone fortresses.
The
All words
Space
Anakin has no
Marine
understanding of.
muttered to himself. Kaon? Anakin asked, eyes narrowing. The Chaos Space Marine straightened and turned to regard
Very
him,
impressed right
almost
now.
as though his sight had returned.
Can you do that again?
He
Not
asked.
right now.
Anakin's brow furrowed. Can I do what again? What happened? He asked.
He did instinctually.
You changed the rod. You made it an amplifier in place of a suppressor.
That means he has multiple amplifiers stuck through him right now. It's a good thing he's not a chaos sorcerer with OP powers of plot. Otherwise, that would be slightly broken. Oh, God.
Such things have been known to happen, but not from a psychic influence. Only technical skill can cause such things to happen.
Well,
Right now,
psychic technology.
I feel my lost power, but I have 11 more rods impaled within my body. If you can do that again,
Kaon said.
11 more.
Anakin grimaced, but then stood up and cracked his neck. So, if I help you reverse the rest of them, you will be able to help me take out the other blank rooms, right?
Scoshman, did Anakin just reverse the polarity of the neutron flow? Oh my God, is that from Star Trek? It sounds like a Star Trek quote with that level of techno-babble. And yes, technically he did exactly that. He reversed the polarity, and it might be a neutron flow for all I know. Oh, I don't even... It's so stupid. Rip-Off Productions. He has 1 amplifier and 11 suppressors. Oh my God. I know we're giving Fan a hard time right now about all the rods he's working with, but it's in my head now. I'm not going to get it out. I can't.
He asked.
no, Anakin Skywalker. If you can reverse all
it's a Doctor Who
11
me?
of
Oh.
these rods, then we will not need to. With their power alone, I will be able to force open a space for us. And then, all we will need are my weapons.
Said the sorcerer. Anakin smiled wryly at that and flexed his mechanical hand. All right, then what are we waiting for?
You not to die? Oh, we're back to Nerva and the Faithful Flame. That must be the machine she's in. The Knight.
The tech priest was guessing, literally flying by the seat of her pants at this point. She had studied everything, from the ritual of becoming, the theories and logics behind the mind-machine interface of the ancient thrones, and even memorized most of the facts having to do with the understood components of the awe-inspiring...
Oh, because she's making the connection now to the Knight. I wasn't aware we'd actually get to see the internal workings of what she perceives on this. I actually expected what Fan would do would be to go to the outside and show the various people reacting to the knight either shaking or in some way freezing up, and showing how the battle was going around, with her just showing some kind of expression as unintentional flinches happen on her physical body. But if we're seeing the internal fight, maybe fight, Nerva's going through, that's completely different, because this, I have no idea how it's going to be interpreted.
Firing war machine which surrounded her. But what she was attempting now was nearly heresy. Yet, for the sake of the machine cult, Nerva was willing to risk it.
Pretty sure it's full-on heresy.
After all, the ritual of becoming was, by her reasoning, not sacred in and of itself, but rather it enabled the sacred work of her machine. So,
just don't let anyone else find out about it.
To speed it up or skip it entirely wouldn't break with true dogma, would it?
I love specifically how Fan adds in that little "would it" at the end to show that she's very much aware she's telling herself a lie right now, but also she still has to do it because everything else is so fucked at the moment. I really like that, because it builds up her as a character not being so absolutely dead set on, I'm doing it this way and it's going to work, which is kind of how he has portrayed most others people in the Mechanicus of, I am doing it this way. And that's where the thought process stops. And frankly, how most of 40K portrays anyone in the mechanic as being, we doing it, it's going to be this way, I'm right, fuck all y'all. Having that moment of doubt just makes her so much more human, though. And it's one of the things he's done consistently with Nerva. It makes her probably the most fascinating AdMech character I've ever heard. Minus Call, but for completely different reasons. Call takes that, I'm doing it my way, fuck all y'all, but he dials it up to 11, adds another 11 on there, a couple more 11s, because he just dials it to 11 11s at that point. You're not really at anything. You just like an entire 7-11 worth of 11s and dumped them on someone's head and laughed. That seems like an accurate way to represent Call as a level of bullshit, yeah.
She pushed such encroaching thoughts out of her focus, closing her eyes in the same moment. Sin or not, she was committed to her course of action. She needed this night up and moving, and she needed it to happen in a matter of minutes, not hours. She could feel the weight of the guardsman sitting on top of her, could feel him shifting around as he failed to make the seating more comfortable, despite trying to. Behind her head, dendrite couplings and mind interface units extended out from the command throne, moving through her dark hair and finding the input ports which ringed the back of her skull. One by one, they hissed and connected, each mechanical serpent seizing a socket with circular jaws and sealing tight around it.
It's not what Fan intended, but every time I hear anything about clamping into the skull, ever since I watched the initial Matrix, the entire idea of jacking in and like physically inserting things to connect has always freaked me out on like a visceral level. So hearing that right now is just squick, very squick. It's good, it's well written, but it's creepy as fuck to me, man.
There was a cold sensation then, as she was linked into the data exchange system of the night, not unlike the sensations she received when coupling to a local noosphere. With her connection now secure and confirmed nominal, she waited for just a moment, listening for feedback, for the soul which dwelt within the machine. But, as she expected, it was unresponsive, almost silent.
Oh, but it is there, though.
Farness shifted in
Almost
the darkness,
is not
and
silent.
the battle raged outside. But beyond those muffled sounds, there was something else, whispering.
And of course, Fan chimes in, Squick is my favorite Skaven. Yes, yes. God. While I don't really like the Skaven faction, rats are a no-go for me. I absolutely love how crazy they are to play against because, frankly, they're fun. It's one of the reasons I really want to get more into Age of Sigmar, but also that would involve having to paint the army I got. Snake ladies. And I just don't know how to paint scales yet.
Nerva resisted the urge to fidget. She knew what came next normally. Hours and hours of waiting as the psychic impressions and neural echoes of countless former nights burrowed their way into her skull and became a part of her.
How long is she supposed to sit there?
Perhaps an even larger part of her than who she was now. But there
How
was
much of her
no
is still gonna be
time,
her,
no
though?
time at all. Swallowing and squeezing her closed eyes until light shone in her blindness, she did something that her master had warned her never to do.
Forcing herself to take
She
over
did
the
not
machine.
wait idly, meditatively, as the machine's spirit began to feed her the knowledge and imprints she would need to become its master.
So she's forcing it through with just her current mindscape, as opposed to a slow connecting process. This almost sounds more like an Evangelion description as opposed to something out of 40K. Although, Ritual of Becoming takes hours, if not days. And she's forcing it right now is just flat out, we're doing this. And that's why it would possibly break, because if she doesn't have the knowledge put into her to actually move it correctly, she has to guesstimate. And she has no idea what she's guesstimating at.
Instead, she reached backwards towards the mechanical mind of
taking
the
the
fateful
information.
flame with her own, serpent-like in the suddenness of her assault. She acted as she would while performing a mind intrusion on a hostile enemy, and by that hostility,
might
Nerva
bite
found
back.
herself swallowed up into the mind of the machine, like a shadow cat leaping headlong into
am I
a
looking at?
ravine. The darkness she found waiting for her there was blacker and deeper than any the human eye could process, becoming a blindness which devoured the very concept of sight and color. The sensation was so strong, too strong. Nerva tried to withdraw, seeking something, anything as a reference point, but like someone who'd fallen into a pit, she could but scrabble at the sides of infinity.
So now it sounds like we're going to get a description of something that is normally what the Ritual of Becoming lets them avoid. A direct interface with the machine spirit. And we get to see just how human or not human and self-aware or not self-aware this version is. I know battleships have full-on AIs, because that's something that's been covered in various different sources of media about 40K. Knights usually have a lower level, sometimes described as anywhere from a dog to a fully sentient AI, but the AI is usually more on the Titan level. A Knight, though, it depends on the writer. I don't know which way fans are going to go. I'm assuming it won't be an AI level intelligence, but I also don't know what he's aiming towards. Also, the art he chose, it very much looks like a servo skull hooked up to the rest of a mechanical body. And frankly, that would be absolutely hilarious to me if there was just a servo skull tech priest. Oh,
Not halt or even stall her descent. She tried to close her eyes to shield herself from the darkness gnawing away at her identity through them, but found she had no eyelids to close, or perhaps no eyes to shield.
it's too
She
much
felt her
overwhelming.
mind stretching like taffy, pulled farther and farther apart, leaving her shivering, tingling as though she was hovering over the precipice of a final experience. Her last thought was,
Is this death?
and even that thought was a barely coherent sliver in the screaming ocean of her rapidly darkening mind. And then, like a rubber band being released just before the point of snapping, she was back. Hard breaths pushed in and out of her, filling her lungs in grateful heaves. Wonderful sensations spread back throughout her body, reminding her of what living was, and for many moments she could not but appreciate the sudden vividness of her life and continued existence.
Is this her failing to connect, her successfully connecting, or succeeding in pulling out when she invaded the machine's mind and getting slapped down by the machine spirit itself?
Such was her elation at life that it took the young tech priest and aspirant many seconds to even realize her sudden mutilation.
Mutilation?
She gasped a panic-ridden breath, rolling up from the flat floor she found herself on as she suddenly noticed her missing pieces, wringing her now incomplete hands together. Her eyes bulged at the sight before her as what was left of her digits ran over the places where she had been disassembled.
Is she talking about the mechanical sections, or is she talking about the physical sections that were there? I don't know. And is this a mindscape as well? Because I thought it's probably a mindscape, so she's looking at pieces of herself that were literally bitten off by the machine spirit when she invaded its privacy.
Verifying through touch what her eyes had already
Unless this is all
told
happening
her.
in the cockpit as well.
Smooth, unbroken skin, 5 whole, flesh-composed fingers and a nail topping each one.
What?
Nerva patted her body, finding that she was dressed in only thin, richly red robes.
Oh, never mind. It's a full-on mindscape, and the mutilation is actually the lack of mutilation from our perspective. Oh, that's actually a really cool way to flip around the expectation. Normally, mutilation is missing parts, and in her case, she internalized the mechanical add-ons as parts of her. So just going into a mindscape where it's just her mind, where it's just the physical human thought experiment of what you believe yourself as, is how she's represented. So it looks like mutilation to her because it's not how she perceives herself, even if internally it's probably how she does, because she still thinks of herself as human. There's plenty of Magoses who definitely would not look human in the mindscape because they are, I mean, they're absolutely monstrous. And their mind is beyond a human scope and terms of thinking. So that would not surprise me. It's kind of cool, though, how now that she's entering it, she's immediately thinking of it as mutilation because of that. It's the nice reverse for another person who has all the cybernetic aspects suddenly seeing a human flesh body only, be like, oh, I'm back. It's just a really cool change of perspective to show the exact same situation. Well done.
She touched her abdomen, her legs, her face. Gone. Her augmentations were gone. All of them. She tried again and again to access her extra human additions and found herself without the sense of them.
And this would also be why a lot of pilots probably break if they do this, because anyone in the mechanic is suddenly stripped of all their augments, which become their entire world, and reduced to just actual human, is a mind-breaking, absolutely shattering experience. So I think this step is probably the one that kills them more than anything else.
Or sign of their existence. Her eyes scanned her surroundings, looking first at the floor near her as though she might find her missing parts laid out beside her. But there was nothing. A black, glossy floor of obsidian-like composition stretched out endlessly around her, and an equally black void yawned wide across each horizon, leaving her in darkness. She tried to cycle her vision into the infrared and then ultraviolet spectrums, but found her eyes unresponsive. Instinctively, her thoughts twitched and moved to run a full systems diagnostic, but again, nothing was there to receive the command. Suddenly, a weak flashing caught her, the soft pulsing of a line of runes visible in her vision.
Runes?
Faded, almost imperceptible, the line read, "Intrusion Alert," in soft, fuzzy red lettering.
So she's seeing the mindscape on a virtual plane that the night itself is putting out there. But the fact that it's showing up as runes is a very specific thing. Normally, if you're in a mindscape, you think of the person whose perspective you're in is the one showing you this. But considering she's not perceiving herself in a way she has understanding of, it's probably the knight's perspective showing up. And the knight thinks in knightly magical terms, apparently, because that's why it's showing runes with the prompt. Interesting. The implications are interesting. I could see this being handled different ways. Either Fan is laying into the knightly aspect and going full on board and sword and sorcery. Or it could be leading into what some people have talked about, and I'm not sure how much I will credit this to Fan's thought process or not, about there being a more psychic aspect to most knights and most technology, and this being the way it's represented. I personally think that might be where 40K is heading, but I'm not sure if that's what's been embraced by the fan community in general, or even all of the writers on 40K proper. It's something that few writers have hinted at and started to move towards, but not all of them. Ooh, almost hit the end stream button by accident. That'd be embarrassing.
Comprehension filled Nerva like molten steel filling a mold. She was, even then, still interfacing with the night. This whole space was a mindscape she had been pulled into. The tech priest stood cautiously and marveled at the incredible finesse of it. She had almost no sense of her true body at all. and even her most intimate mind augmentations were being blocked and numbed out of her perception with limited exception. Her fingers felt just like fingers, and the detail in each sensation of it was crisp and completely real. Perhaps too real, in fact. She could not recall having such a fine sense of touch, nor such clear vision. Nerva breathed in again, appreciating the rush of false air into her digital body. The temperature was comfortable. The gravity was a perfect match for Terran standard, at least so far as she could tell. But much as she was...
And in the chat said the runes are merely representations of her technology trying to communicate with her. Oh, okay. So that's not actually the knight displaying the... so that's her technology displaying it in a way that would actually interface with where she's currently in the mindscape. Interesting.
Was impressed by this mindscape. She was also short on time. Straightening, she looked about again, searching for any sign of the plain void, seeking the center of the machine's mind, seeking access. She almost fell backwards as she turned around and found that something had come upon her, silent in spite of its size.
I mean, it's a mindscape, so physics can take a break.
She cried out in a way which was somewhat less than dignified, but recovered quickly, taking just a few steps back from the towering form before her. An enormous silver throne had stealthily materialized behind her, its backrest rising up into lance-like spires of metal. The throne would have been smooth, but for a haphazard pattern of deep, rectangular cuts of varying sizes and dimensions, which coated the entirety of the throne itself, giving it the appearance of an incomplete puzzle. Yet, more interesting than the odd nature and design of the seat was the being which was seated upon
Oh,
it.
so it's not empty.
Looking small, almost toy-like amongst the enormity
Is it
of
the
throne,
knight itself
was a
or the
silver-skinned
previous
child dressed in a white robe. The robe was pristine, embroidered with electrum runes Nerva could not read, and woven around its wearer, being composed of a single wide and long sheet of cloth. The one who wore it was small and seemingly crippled, missing their right arm and left leg, as well as a part of their head and face, and several fingers and toes as well.
Now that's interesting. If this is a mindscape and that's either the knight or an accumulation of the previous pilot's experiences, what does it mean to be missing parts of themselves? Because there's plenty of missing information. Maybe that's why the knight isn't self-running then.
The amputations, if that was indeed what she was meant to interpret them as, were odd in the extreme. Each one was covered in smooth, unbroken silver skin, implying no wounds were ever dealt or blades ever actually applied.
Born wrong?
And yet,
because
the
knights are
lines
broken
and
from what they
edges of
should have
each
been.
missing
That's been implied more than a few
portion of
times.
The being's body denoted a very clear, artificial removal. In fact, the more she considered it, the more it seemed that the being itself was artificial in nature and not just in truth, as everything here would be quote-unquote artificial, even her own current body. Bald, smooth, and androgynous, the creature was a beautiful rendition of the human form, save for the asymmetry created by its odd
So it almost sounds like Fan is giving a visual representation of a knight's, well, machine spirit, and showing that it's been heavily tinkered with and or born wrong. But they wouldn't know that because 40K and technology, it's great and not great at the same time. Also, Xeon Dragon heading out. Oh, night shift? Yeah. Thanks for watching, man. Oh, dude.
Pieces. As if very intentionally signaling itself out as a machine spirit.
Yep.
She drew in a sharp breath, her emotions finally catching up with the directness of what she was attempting. Then she froze, clamping a tight control over her every errant thought and physical impulse. The tech priest watched the spirit, and it stared at her in return, unblinking and expressionless.
Oh, it has
Her
eyelids at
human
least.
form reflected within a single blue eye. The other was missing, along with a large rectangular portion of its head and face.
I am Nerva Sharp 370Z.
She said, standing tall and rigid,
Sharp,
face
really? Oh,
perfectly
guess that's the first time I heard that.
placid.
Or unless I forgot.
The being tilted its head slowly, its lips trembling, as though it may speak or cry, before its neck gradually twisted back to its original posture, all words unspoken.
Huh.
She did not blink, and so the sudden change of scenery was even more jarring.
Oh.
In one moment, they had been within a void of glossy black, and now they were somewhere else, bright, white, sterile. Her composure nearly broke, but true to her discipline, she remained still. Only slowly moving her head from side to side, absorbing her new surroundings with eyes that trembled from the effort it took her not to react. She was within a laboratory of some kind, a sleek, pale space filled with smooth desks and elegant, almost Xenos machines.
Memory?
Banks of what Nerva took to be impressively sized cogitators hummed in small fields around her. Each machine submerged in tranquil pools of sky blue coolant.
Is this a memory of the creation of the night? Most nights are pre-Dark Age, or constructed by some of the AI components on night worlds. But what is Fan showing here?
Above her was a high domed ceiling composed of viewing windows, and all around her
This almost
were
sounds like a
men and
Dark
women
Age
dressed in
construction.
white and pale blue gowns.
How old is this night?
They seemed not to notice her as she stood there, and looking back towards where the Silver Child had been, she found now only an empty throne being fussed and worked on frantically. The entire lab quaked then, metal squealing and glass tinking and shattering. The tremor was more than a little alarming, but
Oh! Because this is a Mechanicum, or Mechanicus at the time. So this would be probably during the Old Night period. Not even the Dark Age, but what not it would be at the end of the Dark Age of technologies. This is a very recently created night, because a lot of them were created, they're all relics. Mechanicus can still create some, but this one, considering she doesn't recognize the technology, it looks impressive and huge and alien almost. This is definitely Dark Age of technology level, and considering the concept that things are breaking, this would definitely feel more like this is either in the War Against the Machines or in the beginning of Old Night, where things all go to shit.
from the
This
way
is a
in which
very
the
old
men and women
machine.
around her continued to toil without pause, she guessed it was not the first one, and that its origin was no mystery to these people. In fact, from the way they seemed to hasten their delicate work when the next tremor came, she
Bad,
suspected that
but
their
not
current
unexpected.
task and source of whatever force was assailing them were intimately interlinked. A man stepped through her then, revealing her wraith-like nature in this space for the first time, his
A
body
memory.
breaking through hers like a bank of mist, though she felt nothing.
How many people in Mechanicus would break
From
seeing
his
this?
unbroken stride, she surmised he did neither, and observed with interest as he approached the throne, and one of the women working on it nearby, a tall scientist, her face obscured with a surgical mask and heavy, augment-linked eyewear.
Oh,
In
Wait.
contrast to her,
augment linked eyewear. Is that saying that the eyes are augmented to link with it, or that the glasses are augmented and they're the ones linked? Let's see if there's a better way to put it here. They're masking heavy augment linked eyewear. Based on this construction, it almost sounds like the eyewear or the augmented aspect, not just the eyes themselves linked to the eyewear. Could go either way because it's 40K though.
augment-linked eyewear. In contrast to her, the approaching man wore a black synthetic jumpsuit, complete with port plugs for neural mind-machine interface and a shiny
He's wearing a
enclosed
plug suit.
helmet.
Oh my god.
Like everything else, his clothing was sleek, yet it bore the defined, sharp lines of something distinctly unscientific. The same message was echoed in the candor of his every step. This man was no researcher,
test
technician,
pilot.
or scientist. He was a warrior. The woman who was approaching him seemed to sense him in the last few feet and turned to face him, looking up from a technical data pad she held tightly in her hands. "It's not ready," she said to him, but the man was already shaking his head. "It has to be. We're out of time. Plug me in," he ordered.
Oh man, this is so cool. Sorry, one of the things I absolutely love about 40K is people giving descriptions and some information about the far past, showing what Old Knight, what the Dark Age of technology looked like, what those enemies were, because every time they come up, it's always a major event in 40K. So fan interpreting this way is really cool. And I'm also wondering if he's going to use this to do more than just show the linking process. But if there's going to be a little bit of information in there that might be relevant to the story continuing now. The only reason I bring that up is because Fan doesn't seem to like to just waste scenes. He has a lot of intertwined points. So it would make a lot more sense to me if what he was doing involved something in this vision being relevant to the story beyond just, and then Minerva succeeded. Or Minerva died and the entire plotline he was pulling up dropped because apparently he didn't like writing anymore. I don't think he would do that because that's something I've only seen a bunch of hack writers do. And I do specifically mean hack, not unpublished and unpaid, but just bad. Personal issues with that, obviously. But it almost seems like he's building up to something and there's a reveal coming.
"Stop! You're not hearing me," the doctor insisted. "It is not ready. Your brain will fry like an egg, and we have no idea if you'll ever get conscious control of the Sentinel. We need to
they're
run
called
tests,
Sentinels?
calibrate the..." "It is inside this city," he said.
What is it?
Though her face was hidden, the woman's posture spoke volumes. "What? How? When?" she started. "Listen, it didn't get inside this city just now. It's been inside the city for almost 10 minutes. We are out of time," said the man in the black jumpsuit.
God damn it, Fan. You're just leaving those little bits in there. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, what is it? Are we talking Men of Iron? Are we talking a psychic monstrosity? Are we talking something else? I don't know.
"Why didn't you... Fine." She relented, tapping
Also,
away
fake
furiously
German
on the
accent.
data pad and stepping aside
Nice.
to allow him passage to the throne. The other technicians and scientists continued their feverish tinkering and adjusting all the while, even as the man sat down.
Also, he referred to as a sentinel. So these knights were initially sentinels instead. Well, that's actually a really cool way to call them.
Even as the mind link unit connected to the back of his head. "But what are we going to do if we lose you?"
Die.
the woman asked him, not looking at the man as she spoke, instead working on her pad. The stark, white lighting of the room suddenly shifted in time with the sound of a loud klaxon, becoming a bright red. The change and sound of the alarm was followed shortly by the loud broadcast of alien words, the same the two had been using to speak. Nerva becoming cognizant of the fact that they were not Gothic of any kind, yet she had no difficulty understanding
what
them.
language were they speaking?
Integration attempt in progress. All personnel, please evacuate the chamber. Integration attempt commencing. Blared the loud yet calm voice over the hidden howlers mounted within the walls. Though most of the people in the room seemed to heed the warning in a hasty rush to escape, the scientist and warrior did not. She waited for his answer, and he gave it with little hesitation, speaking over the automated words. Move on to the next warrior, and the next plan, again and again, and do not mourn me until we are finished. Do not mourn me until we have won, he said to her, voice grim as he gripped the armrest of the throne tightly. Mechanical fissures ripped open across the room, swallowing desks and chairs, machines and tools.
Oh!
It opened perfectly around the throne, and a moment later, Nerva could see why. Most of the floor withdrew to reveal a massive pool of the sky blue coolant. And
They literally had the testing chamber right above the actual holding pen.
the gargantuan form of a humanoid war machine dwelling within.
Oh, is she seeing what it should look like without the Imperium fucking around with the design? I only know that they fucked around with it because in some of the the short stories where they showed an AI in a ship from the Dark Age looking at the designs and everything was wrong. Every time an AI is brought in multiple different stories, usually their entire reaction is, "You done fucked up." I'm heavily simplifying, but that's usually how it goes. What would this thing actually look like if it was correct?
It ascended on mechanical servos, rising to meet the throne, even as the throne slowly began to sink towards it.
What's it going to look like?
All the while, the scientists stood and watched the pilot, standing on a sliver of the floor, a pre-designated space to serve as a thin but dangerous walkway across the lake of thick, pale blue. The superheated metal hissed as it made contact with the air, stirring wind and steam into existence, blowing the woman's lab coat out around her in wild drafts of wickedly whipping air. She stood like a pillar, watching the man descend into the mouth of the machine and be sealed within. And then, pain.
Because
Nerva
she's going through the
maintained her
initial
composure
process.
as best she could, teeth gritting, eyes closing tight as her hands balled into fists, nails sinking into her palms. Still, she remained upright. She stood, and she did not scream. But the pain! The pain! It was devouring everything, and it was growing worse and worse.
Why are you showing me this?
Because she's initially linking with it. Not in the way that most others do, where it's slow and gradual, but in the initial first boot sequence. I can't speak today. Sequence. And they're explaining it by showing, which means that the AI, and I'm assuming it's more of an AI now, is at least somewhat cognizant to give an explanation.
She managed
This
to
is an initial
squeeze
boot in a
past
sim
the cage
situation.
of her constricting teeth. She felt a hand fall onto her shoulder, and the pain ceased all at once, leaving her blinking, lightheaded enough to stumble, but kept steady by the hand. She looked to her right to see who it was, and was shocked to find the pilot standing there. Her own face reflected back at her off the glossy surface of his
And he probably succeeded because a bit of him was left in the machine.
helmet.
Oh. This would imply a lot is going on right now. I love fans' interpretation because that means they have access to information about the dark age of technology, which is both the absolute just manic amounts of interest that anyone in the tech mechanicus or the mechanicus cult would be absolutely obsessed over because high information, but also repelled by because it's so much different from how they treat technology. And it's still humans doing it rather than Xenos who could just be killed off and ignored. And I think this might actually work because she's in the same situation as the initial boot up sequence. Desperation, out of time, and doing it fast.
They had returned to the Black Void, though the Silver Child was nowhere to be seen. He took his hand away from her and
how much of this
pressed
do
a
normal
release on the
pilots
back
never
of his
find
neck.
out?
The helm hissed and clicked, and he pulled it away, revealing a handsome, middle-aged face, framed in a beard, mustache, and hair of bright orange, holding a pale face and gray eyes. "You are being shown this, aspirant, as a mercy," he said to her. She turned to fully face him and stepped away.
A mercy? That pain was mercy? And what am I supposed to take away from that kind of mercy?
Nerva
You're
asked,
not ready?
breathing heavily as she attempted to rein back her control.
Or why?
Your life, Nerva Sharp 370Z. I am the memory of Amunak Pental, the first pilot of this night, and I died attempting the mistake you are about to embark upon. There is no way to rush the integration. A human will is simply not powerful enough to withstand it. Go back. Return to your true flesh.
So that does imply that he failed, so whatever they're fighting had to go to the next one.
Escape this fate while you can.
Unless
it leads
dying
not
and
to
being stuck in
salvation,
doesn't matter.
but to painful death. Go back, he said to her.
She really can't.
Nerva shuddered, considering him for only a few moments before firming her jaw and spreading her stance somewhat.
I cannot.
She said. The words gave her further strength, and she fixed defiant eyes upon the failed ghost of the first night.
I will not.
You're just cutting it there, Fan? Oh, god damn. Oh. That is... Oh. I mean, just... How to put this? I'm looking at this right now, and all I can think is, god damn. I have so many questions, and all of them are, what is this leading into? What is going on? How is this going to change things? And where can I get more information? Because I want more. What were they fighting against? What was he thinking of to make this a thing? And I just, gah! I'm assuming he probably succeeded in connecting and then immediately died, because that doesn't make sense otherwise. That said, I mean... While that would make sense, because he would die in the process, but he gets linked there, I'm assuming that also means Minerva is going to be going full Ghost in the Shell on this one. Granted, she also has way more mechanical parts to then relink to, so she'll probably have that, but just... There's a lot going on. I'm not quite sure what's going on, and Fan is just chiming in with in the chat, so I don't know what he's going on. He's definitely doing the intentional... Just being a dick and not saying shit right now, because one, it would be a spoiler, and two, there's more going on. He thought about something happening and he didn't show what it was, so we know spoiler there. We know spoiler. Wow, I can English today. And more surprising than anything, my internet didn't crash. This is the first time in, I think, 7 or 8 streams where that has not happened. I have no idea why. I'm not going to complain, but I'm also not going to hold up any help. I can't speak today. Hope that it won't crash within the next 5 seconds to prove me wrong, because it's done that. This is a blast. I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this for every episode, just because I don't know if I'll have time to do this every episode, and after Christmas, I definitely won't. But at least when I can, I'm going to try and do these episodes live, because there's just so freaking much. That said, whenever I can't, I'll just record an episode like normal and put it out like I've been doing before. It really just comes down to time. I had it today, so that's just awesome. And then Fan just said, and that typically means death. Typically, though, is a very interesting word, because it's probably her not dying. Whether that implies she has body after this, I don't know. But I don't really think it matters, because it'll be a cool ride either way. So much is going on. I can't wait to see more of what's happening. That scene with Iskandar and Anakin, I can understand how it was not meant as it came off. But once someone pointed out that it was unintentionally not YouTube safe, it was in my head, and it wouldn't come out. All the same, I do want to do another stream. I'll see if I have time next week. If I don't, it'll just be a pre-recorded video. We'll see what happens. Otherwise, you guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. I'll see you in the next one. Adios. That was so freaking good.